I'm Scott L. Miller. It is Sunday night. It is Leon live here in Nicaragua, doing the show from Sutiaba, and didn't have a show for today, so we're just doing a live. Going to hang out for a little while and do an impromptu live. So I hope everyone is doing well. Hope everyone had a nice weekend and so forth. So let's hop on and get people going. I have been hanging out this weekend watching Northern Exposure. That has been my throwback. It's been 36 years. 36 years since I watched Northern Exposure when it first came out with my parents. It didn't come out with my parents. I watched it with my parents. When it first came out in 1990, I was 14 years old, so the same age as my youngest. And and it was a really popular show when I was 14. And so it was a cool show that I really enjoyed, and I remember it really well, but I never saw it in reruns. And I've never seen it since in any way. I don't have a copy of it or anything of the sort. And so it's cool to me to have an opportunity to go back and see it now. And it just kind of, I don't know what caught my eye about Northern Exposure. I should totally go and watch that. So I've been watching that over the past 48 hours or so, over the weekend. And boy, does it bring back memories. Every episode is something that I remember. And when it gets to something this old, if it was like a more popular sitcom that I saw in reruns throughout my childhood, I kind of expect to have like a solid memory of it. But this was young enough that I was only 14. And I only ever saw it once. And it wasn't a show that I was really into, I didn't think, but now going back and watching it, I know every character, every episode, and it's just really neat to go back and see it. So I really enjoy being able to hunt down these old series, especially movies, much less, but these old series that were part of my childhood, and really being able to watch them. And unlike in my childhood, right when it was 1990, we had broadcast TV. I didn't have cable growing up. The part of the country I grew up in didn't have cable, and so shows were as shows are, right? They came out on whatever this was, Tuesday night at a certain time or whatever, and that's when you would watch it, and that's all there was. And now I'm able to go back and watch them as I kind of get to binge it. I get to apply this modern take to watching the show, and it's such a different experience seeing them, one episode right after another, and remembering the story as it goes, because it's so, when you go back and watch it the old way, you become disconnected from the show in so many ways. And so it's just been really fun watching Northern Exposure, and because much more recent than Northern Exposure, I'm a huge fan and have watched more than once the series Ballykiss Angel. And it never occurred to me until I started watching Northern Exposure that I'm like, okay, so this is older by a few years, by several, like 6 years, and oh my gosh, this is Ballykiss Angel. And then I went and looked at it. So Belize Angel did not credit Northern Exposure as being like its original show, but loads of people talk about even in the 90s, and the original advertising tag for Belize Angel was Ireland's answer to Northern Exposure. And so that very interesting, just how similar the two shows are. I mean, really surprisingly similar because I watched Belize Angel sometime in the last year, right? And I do like that one better, but it's so good. Larry says, Northern Exposure, written by the creator of Sopranos, David Chase. It is David Chase. That's correct. That's Richard says, I like listening to you. Well, thank you very much. Brian is the first one here. Janet says, lol, hi. Lending Look says, howdy. Hey, everybody. And yeah, so that's been my weekend discovery. I have no topic for tonight So feel free to jump in with things. I've been working all weekend, as I often do, no surprise there, and enjoying Northern exposure while I work. I did hang out with the kids last night, and we finished binge watching Mako Mermaids, which I'm not going to go so far as to recommend to anybody, but it is the second in a series of Australian mermaid shows, all of which are pretty bad. H2O Just Add Water is the first one, and that was we binged that. And I remember my kids watching that with their cousins when they were little, and because it came out like I think before either of my daughters was born, definitely before the younger, and then it had a sequel that came out a few years later, Mako Mermaids. Both of them are 3 seasons, so not super long, but very low budget Australian kid shows, not like children's shows, like tween shows, and not comedies, but like light drama, sort of. Very weird. But my kids have these memories of these shows because they watched them when they were little, and so we've been watching them again. So we finished the second one. So we finished both of those, and my youngest has decided, because she, for some reason, does not like sitcoms, but has decided that she wants to go back and experience this piece of Americana from before her era. And so starting tonight, we are going to begin binging all 10 seasons of Friends, which is weird. I cannot believe that my children have opted, with nobody pushing them whatsoever, to watch Friends of all things. But my eldest likes sitcoms, so pretty much a 90s sitcom, she's in. Right? She's like, that's not my favorite, but you know, it's always any 90s sitcom, and she's gonna be kind of okay. But my youngest, just being like, let's binge Friends. I think I need to know the entirety of Friends. Is just like, who are you? What brought that? I can't even begin to figure out what triggered her wanting to watch that. But we're gonna watch that, and I'm not a huge Friends fan, but I think it's fine. I'm one of those odd, on the fence Friends watchers. I didn't watch it when I mean, I did. Like, I saw it when it was new, but I didn't like watch it. So I was very familiar with the characters, but I didn't know like the big story arcs or anything, because I would only see it occasionally. But when several years ago, probably like 10 years ago, I managed to get a copy of all of it. I can't remember, like I got access to it, Netflix or something. And I said, you know what, I've never seen Friends. And it's such a, like, I like everything I've seen of it, I'm okay with it. I don't hate Friends. And it's such an iconic thing, I should probably watch it. And so at some point I just sat down and watched the whole thing. And I was like, you know, it was pretty much what I thought. Like, it was okay, but it wasn't anything special. But I didn't see it until I was older. And so a lot of people either love it or really don't enjoy it. And I'm oddly like, yeah, it's very much a background sitcom. Like, I can watch it anytime. I like the characters. I like the general vibe, but I'm not passionate about it in any way. I actually prefer the spinoff show Joey that came after it more. But yeah, Larry says, my heart can't take all these pop-up shows. Mr. Framan Ot 1. Hi, Scott. Do you plan on visiting Venezuela? They have started granting tourist visas electronically. That's awesome. I had not heard that. I certainly do want to visit Venezuela, most certainly. From here, it's generally not too horrible to get there, although very few people do, but there are regular flights, or at least under normal circumstances, there's very regular flights between here and Venezuela. Sadly, not direct. That would be amazing. But we're a very small destination. So Conviasa, the flag carrier for Venezuela, does fly here, but they don't fly here from Venezuela, which is about the weirdest thing ever. And it's the largest flight that I know of that comes into Nicaragua. So if you go to Managua Airport and you wait for the big airlines to fly in, the big flight is Conviasa coming in from Havana. It's, you know, normally the flights in from Miami, which do come quite frequently, are quite small. And the Conviasa from Havana is huge. Just hundreds and hundreds of people coming through all at once. And so, oh, Brian, I'll get to that. You're too young for Northern exposure. I was technically too young for it, but my parents had me watch it early, and I enjoyed it. But certainly I want to go to Venezuela. It's very close here physically. It's very close culturally, and I absolutely love Venezuelan food, culture, music, vibe. It's one of the most diverse landscapes in the world. Got great islands and Caribbean life, but also Andean life. Like it's got a lot going for it. And one of my best friends is Venezuelan, so we've talked about going together and doing some exploration of Caracas, which is where she had grown up. But obviously, so it had been in my plans actually to go this year, but obviously we're waiting to see how things come out with the U.S. involvement there. But Venezuela is at the very top of my list of places that I want to both visit and invest. So I'm very passionate about Venezuela as a destination, but have not made it there yet. And I don't have plans that are like scheduled, but it is very high on my list, probably going without my family for the first time. But I know lots of people, mostly from the show, who either live there part-time, or had moved there and put in quite a bit of time, and relatively recently, and have information that is very safe, very accessible, all the things that we're worried about aren't real. But the benefits of coming from Nicaragua is you get a little bit better optics, right? So certainly up there on my list. Absolutely. I do have to travel for work. I'm scheduled to be in both Belize and Bolivia this year. So I really wish that Caracas had good flights to those places and I could use it for things. You can't. Or else I would be like, sometimes I go through here, sometimes I go through there. Because sometimes, like, even going to Belize, I'll go through Panama. And going to Bolivia, I'll go through Peru. Right? And it would be great. You can, in almost all those cases, you can swap out Bogota instead of Lima, which is nice. You can just mix it up. But it would be nice if you could mix in Caracas sometimes, right? Now, it's a little bit farther away, but if their airlines went to the right places, it would not be that much extra flights. And it's nice using, necessary work travel to hit other places. And really, like Caracas to Cochabamba or Santa Cruz de las Sierras or La Paz, my destinations in Bolivia, would only be marginally out of the way, right? It might at most be an extra hour of flight time, which I would gladly do to get a stopover in another country and be able to hang out and do things. I'm going to come back to Brian because Lending Looks asked a related question. What is the visa application like if you go to the embassy in Managua for Venezuela? Under normal circumstances, you can't do that. If you're Nicaraguan, of course you can. But if you are not Nicaraguan, normally the local embassies will not accept you. There will be exceptions. But under normal circumstances, you would not expect to be able to do that. You would have to apply online, which Mr. Franman had said, right? It's an electronic visa. Hopefully that's all we need to do. I can try going to the Venezuelan embassy. Obviously, we have a major embassy here that's very friendly, so that's pretty cool. And, on one side, I'm saying, well, Lending Looks, generally you can't do that. On the other side, I really, really, really want to go visit Algeria coming up really soon. And I keep saying that I'm going to try going to the embassy here in Managua because we just got the Algerian embassy. And if you don't make an appeal in some really good way to Algeria, they don't let you in, right? I mean, if you're coming from I don't know, probably Tunisia, it's probably not too bad. If you're coming from Burkina Faso, it's probably easy. But if you're coming from France, it's impossible. If you're coming from the U.S., it's extremely difficult. So I'm hoping that I can appeal to the embassy here, which probably isn't very busy, I hope, and see if they will grant me. And I may even, appeal to some Nicaraguan authority to get a letter of recommendation type thing. But that's a bit different than Venezuela, where I'm just easily able to go. Some paperwork and stuff, but it's not restricted in any way. But Algeria is a nearly impossible to visit location, but extremely high on my list of places that I want to go. Both, again, to visit and also potentially to invest. My youngest, who is generally the investment gatekeeper for us, has approved Algeria for research for investment because she thinks that that area of North Africa has a lot of potential and so forth. My company has only just started in the last weeks to do business in Africa. We're using it as a new staff location, but not in that region. But we are very interested in Algeria for work purposes, but we are currently in Malawi, and actually Malawi is on shift right now. So I'm actually helping that new office in the background as I'm as every night until we get them up and running. But and of course, going to Malawi would be super cool. But Algeria seems like the place that I really want to hit. Brian says, for those of us who have not heard of it but have heard of it but have never watched, what's Northern Exposure about? So Northern Exposure is kind of groundbreaking. It was the first of this type of show, of which several, including notably Bally Angel, have copied since then. But the formula for Northern Exposure was that Dr. Joel, fresh out of his residence, getting his first position as a doctor, he didn't have the money to pay for medical school, and so he took a deal where the state of Alaska paid for him to get his medical degree, and in exchange he would spend, I think, 5 years working in Alaska as a doctor, as a general practitioner, and they would pay for his education. And so he did that, and he gets sent to Anchorage. But when he arrives in Anchorage, the position is no longer needed, and so he still has to fulfill his obligations. And so he's picked up by a tiny town of 850 people, Sicily, on the what they call the Alaskan Riviera. But they never show any water, so I don't know how close they are supposed to be to the coast. But it's this itty bitty little Alaskan town, and so it's this show of a New York City doctor trapped in small town Alaska and dealing with the quirky characters. So there's a lot of and a lot of the characters I find over the top. So I remember very clearly from my childhood hating his office assistant. She was so obnoxious, and hating the local kid who was everywhere. He's so obnoxious, so rude all the time. The really, really uber conservative weirdos that own the town and own the bar, like they kind of graded you the wrong way. But there were some good characters, and the whole setting, like it. And I think Alaska probably paid for it, because there's a bit of it that's like, oh my gosh, Alaska's so remote, but it's also, wow, what a cool, beautiful spot that you don't think about. And I think that it gives a really positive look for the most part on Alaska. It's all very interesting. But I like the show. It ran for about 5 seasons. It won a ton of awards. Was very important for a lot of things in television development and so forth. And by the end, there is, like, overall the story just it improves. The first season is so much this drama of this small town, or this New York doctor that doesn't want to be there, and this town that really isn't going to do much to accommodate him, and it's just a funny combination of things, I think, for the most part. Hold on. Speaking of Malawi, we actually had something come in. All right, that is me supporting The Office in the background. And so I really like the show in general, even though a lot of the characters I find super annoying. And they really did stick with me. But it's not a comedy, but it's a very light drama that is focused on the life of this incredibly small town in Alaska and how it's influenced by this one person from the outside. And of course, as you would imagine from a show like this, part of the show is how does this outside doctor change Sicily, Alaska? But of course, the bigger story is how does the small town and good hearts of the people of Sicily, Alaska change this doctor, right? And of course, Bally Angel, if you've seen it or have heard of it, sounds exactly the same. Instead of a small village of 800 in Alaska, it's a small village of 800. Yeah, I don't know if that's the size in southeastern Ireland. Instead of the doctor coming in for a few years, it is a priest coming in to man the Catholic Church for a few years. But in both cases, it's an outside professional from a different region or country that is required because of his job to go there and really doesn't have any chance to leave. In the case of Northern Exposure, he legally can't leave. In the case of Bally Angel, the only way for him to leave would be to quit the priesthood. So in both cases, it's dramatic, but one's a little bit more. Both center on the influence of this outsider on the lives of this small village and how that person is changed by their life in the small village. Both of them have similarly quirky characters. Both of them, it's a man who comes into town. Both of them have this one, obviously more together than everyone else woman in town. In the case of Northern Exposure, it's Maggie, the local bush pilot. In the case of Bally Angel, it is... I can't think of her name now, but she owns the local bar, and and it's obviously the relationship between this one like out of place. It's always the really put together woman who's there is somehow magically completely versed in the outside world and would fit into New York City without a problem, but is somehow able to be from this small town. And no one else can, right? In both cases, it's very copycat in that way. And both have the one guy who seems to own the entire town. And both have the annoying crew of idiots who work for that guy because he doesn't pay very well. Like, it's very, very copied in the general characters and a bunch of the tropes and stuff. But both very good shows. It's neat now going and looking at them and being like, oh, this is so related. And no wonder I like both of these shows. They're essentially the same thing in two different settings. But even the settings aren't that different, right? Rural Alaska, rural Ireland, little village, yeah. Brian says, "Your Friends for me would be a background binge." Oh, Friends for me would be a background binge while doing something else like cleaning. Parts of it were funny, but meh to me. Yeah, I'm very much the same with Friends. Like, it's hard to watch it as like a focused show. It's just not that engaging. But no part of it is like annoying or bad. And like the overall theme is okay. There's bits that are funny, but a lot of it's just filler. But as a background show, it's really easy to follow. It's really easy to just have on. And Janet says, I love Northern Exposure, never watched Friends, and I have to rest. I need to get my voice back. Oh, sorry. And that wasn't an ad. Oh. Lending Look says, I remember you telling me Russia would allow me as an American. How is that policy different? Which place are you asking about? Venezuela, it's very similar, but even more so that we're able to go to Venezuela because it's part of LATAM, which is generally very flexible compared to most European countries. Anything European is harder than anything Latin American, just across the board. Now, if you're looking at Algeria, very different, right? Algeria turns away the majority of people who tried to visit. If you're not if you're coming from Africa, but if you're coming from North America or Europe, Algeria is an extremely, now they're not the Sahel. I didn't say that very well. They are not in the Sahel. Which the entire Sahel region has a ban on Americans, period. Full-on ban, nothing you can do. Algeria borders the Sahel and is, like the Sahel nations, extremely anti-colonial. So they consider colonialism a crime. They consider the historical colonial situation in Africa to be a crime against the African people, and specifically the Algerian people, the Sahel people, and so forth. And so if you're from a country like France that actively colonized those countries, you're screwed. Like, they're not even going to look at your application. And if you're coming from a country that is an active colonizer, even though it's not in that region, it's not part of the Sahel, like the U.S., then it becomes very difficult to get in because you're coming from a country that is pro-imperialism and feels that African countries should be exploited for them. And so you have a very hard time making an argument to get in. Whereas, like, Russia is wary of Americans, but it's still a European country with shared background. And like we're talking about Alaska, right? That came from Russia. It is a colonizing power to a lesser extent, like the United States and France and others. So it's more of a We're countries that don't get along so great, so they're very wary of your application. Whereas Algeria is like, why would someone from this culture want to come to a place that they have worked so hard to destroy, kind of thing. But at least coming from the United States, Algeria still has a certain amount of maybe you're okay, but we're not sure. So I think it's, with Russia, you expect almost everyone gets in after a lengthy process and a lot of review. Algeria, you expect nearly no one to get in. You're going to be very lucky if you do. So that's really the biggest difference there. But Algeria looks so cool that definitely want to see what I can do to get in there. It's just got so much value. I mean, not that other places don't, right? But Algeria is kind of our... we don't really want to be living in Europe, but there's a lot about Europe that we like. And one of the coolest things is Algeria brings... This is right, I haven't been there. I have lived in Europe. And having done so, right, we think of Algeria has all the things we really love about Europe, or nearly all the things that you could have. Not being in Europe, right? It has the food, it has the laid back late night dinner culture, it has the Mediterranean waterfront, it has European style architecture, it has Roman history, like more than almost anywhere in Europe does, like more than most of Europe, right? Not as much as Italy, obviously, but more than anywhere else other than Italy. It has the weather that you want. It has gorgeous mountains with cold weather. It has trains. It has public transportation. It has an incredibly high safety record. It's got just all these really, really, really good things that make, and did I mention food? Food, right? Mediterranean and European food, fresh food, healthy food everywhere. Super cheap, super safe. Like, it's like the best of Europe improved, and the only things it doesn't have is like, okay, yeah, this bit of European history that only happened this spot in Europe, yeah, it didn't happen here, so you don't get that. But beyond that stuff, it basically brings you all the parts of Europe that you really want outside of Europe without Europe's pricing and political quagmires and so forth. And so Algeria really seems like a amazing spot to really do some investigation. And its neighbor, Tunisia, also very similar boat, right? All those same options. And then I have spent time in Morocco, its neighbor on the other side, which is also amazing. That was a very cool country. And I think that would all be really great. So I'm very much looking forward to an opportunity to get there. I've got to deal with this ticket because I cannot find the person who's supposed to be working it. Their internet there is not very good. That has been done. Where'd you guys go? There you are. Did you reach out to my contact? Oh, I did not. I need to do that. Sorry, I've been crazy busy. Jillian is here. Hey, Jillian. Remember to like the live, Brian says. Yes, everyone, make sure to give a thumbs up on the show. I've not looked to see how we're doing tonight at all. Decent number of people on. Nothing crazy. It is Sunday night. And I am doing a lot of work in the background. Mostly for Jillian. Hey, Jillian. I've gotten a lot of tickets over to you today. All right, now you guys are a little bit quiet. What else we got going on? We're talking Northern Exposure. We're talking Ballykiss Angel. We're talking Algeria. We're talking Venezuela. Someone mentioned something else. Maybe that was it. Yeah, it's 9 o'clock here in Nicaragua. And it's been very, very quiet for me today. Just doing software engineering and trying to get work done. It's going to be a busy week. Was going to go to Matagalpa this weekend, but my kids weren't feeling up to it. So hopefully soon. I don't know when we're going to get a chance. It's a little bit tough to fit everything in because Paul, who normally stays and watches the 3 dogs and the 7 indoor cats, and we have to feed the 5 outdoor cats. It keeps us very busy. He is heading to Colombia, and so we are going to be short on people here. So what is new with all of you? What do you guys got going on? Technically 10 p.m., Brian says, in Mountain Time. Is that right? No, Eastern Time. Eastern Time. Let's look at wait, did I do 36 tickets today? Is that what that number is? Oh, here we go. Lending Look says, some go to the border to get cash and bring it in, and some have a crypto network. What? Am I missing something? Are you talking about Russia or Algeria? What border do people go to get cash? Central. Oh no, Central Time is 9 p.m. Central Daylight Time is a code for Eastern Standard Time. So Texas is on Eastern Standard or Central Daylight Time or Central Summer Time, but Central Time remains at 9 p.m. because the real Central Time doesn't change. But Central U.S. Time switches to Eastern for whatever reason. The land without working clocks. Or the fourth world. I think any country with a flipping clock has to be considered the fourth world. That should be a hard requirement to use the term developed nation. If time is not a construct that is prepared to be measured, it can't. Jillian says, yeah, this morning. Wow, that's a lot of tickets. I've been busy. and I've been stuck on some that just keep going and going and going, trying to get them over to you. There's some tough ones. We had what do we have to eat today? Gosh, I don't remember. Ramen, peanut ramen with tofu. That was pretty good. It's been such a slow weekend. No news whatsoever. I have pretty much not left this seat other than to hang out with my kids and watch those shows with them. This has actually been a really good weekend, right? For me, it's rare that I actually get a long stint weekend that isn't full of interruptions. And this one has been quite good, that I've been able to go like the whole weekend almost with able to stay focused on work. Not 100%, but much higher than normal. And it shows. The amount of work I've been pumping out is quite high. So I'm very happy with that, that I've managed to be very productive, because I get interrupted so much during the week. It is so crippling to me, because any interruption, anything that pulls me away from my desk is an hour lost, just like that. Because I have to, all my tools time out. Everything I'm working on, I don't know what stage it's in. I have to restart a bunch of things. I have to sit down and read everything and figure out where I am. It's very hard for me to maintain the status when I get pulled away and have to think. If I just say like, oh, give me a cup of coffee, that doesn't reset me. But as soon as someone pulls me away from my desk and is like, I need you to do a thing or whatever. And like last night we had a cat escape, which was devastating, because the last time a cat escaped into our yard, our dog killed it. And so that was very scary, but the cats are larger now. And little Chimera who is the smallest of our older kittens, went face to face with Mia, the large dog, and Mia stood down. Luckily, I did yell. I'm like, no, and she's like, but this little kitten, right in her face, and and she was okay. She made it out to a tree and ran up the tree, and I was able to walk out in the yard and pull her out of the tree and walk her back in, and keep her safe. So she's fine, but that was very scary. That was about the only thing. But all these little things like that, that is then an hour interruption to me. I don't remember anything that I was working on, so I end up, I do kind of make use of the interruptions. I'll go use the bathroom. I'll go get a drink. I will maybe grab a snack. I'll walk around a tiny bit, which is not a bad thing. But then I get back to my desk. I'm like, what the heck was I working on? And once I get into the groove, I just knock out so much work, and getting an interruption that was unnecessary can, throughout the week, I probably lose 80% of my work week to those interruptions that I just can't get away from it. And one of the big ones is because this is the outside, this corner, like over here, you can't quite see it, but it's right here, is the outside corner of the house next to the garage. And anytime someone comes to the house, they just come up here and interrupt me, whether it's by screaming in the window or knocking or whatever. They'll do something, and everyone in the house, no matter what, just ignores them, knowing that I have to deal with it, right? Because they know I can hear them screaming. Everyone knows that I can't work with it going on, and the dogs, because they're with me, will start freaking out. So people know if they yell in the window, they'll trigger the dogs, and I can't even hear myself. Like it's painfully loud with the dogs barking like crazy in here, and so it essentially forces me to get up and deal with whatever the situation is. And everyone has become conditioned to this. Well, Scott's going to be forced into it. And so I will just over and over again throughout the day, these little stupid things like that become these crippling interruptions. And it really impacts me. Real quick, I'm going to mention, I did a review this week of the Nicaraguan citizenship requirements, residency versus citizenship, from a relatively new channel that had done a lot of comments on my channel. We actually ended up banning them from the channel because everything they post, so this is just important for people to be aware, they are apparently acting as U.S. agents, and they've made quite a few comments that definitely suggest that they don't believe in Nicaraguan sovereignty. They believe that the U.S. is authoritative over Nicaragua, that the U.S. State Department determines Nicaraguan law, not Nicaragua. And then he was putting out shows on his channel that are just straight up lies. The entire video, barely a word of it isn't lies. So just warning people that Nicaragua Expat Life is spewing misinformation, and at a degree that there's not even the remotest possibility of being accidental. He makes claims like, oh, it's so hard to become a citizen. He's put in a year working on it with a lawyer, and then explains that he's never done the first step, never actually tried to become a citizen, totally lied about it. Whole video based on a lie, everything based on a lie. Says he can't get residency because, and he gets information backwards, says, oh, his online business doesn't qualify as a rentista. Of course it does, right? Straight up lies about everything, every aspect. I watched the video. There's barely a word in the entire video that isn't fabricated. I have no idea what his goal is, but he has posted on my channel. We've nuked it all now because he violated so many rules. He violated the be a good expat rule. He violated the do not lie rule, and so it went away. But just warning people, because these folks tend to come up with new channels, and I saw in his comments all these people are like, oh, finally someone who's willing to give me real information, which looks like a plant. It's probably a bot posted that, but it makes it look like, at a casual glance, maybe there's some real information there, and there is not. Like, not a single word. Every bit of it was fake. This morning, I know, just put you on your soapbox. Jillian says, yeah, I know. What countries in Africa have you been to besides Algeria? Only to Morocco. I've not spent much time in Africa, just, a few days. Really want to go and spend some time So much that I want to see. I was planning on doing a big trip a number of years ago, and it just didn't happen. I can't remember when that was. I feel like that was actually right before we moved to Nicaragua. It was probably during COVID that a lot of things got disrupted, and I lost a lot of stuff. So hoping to get over there soon. Lived in Europe, so I used to live close enough to take the ferry to Tunisia, and trying to do that, but didn't get to. So friggin' hot. Hold my beer. Watch this. Tony says, "OMG." It was. Ron says it was hot today. And then Lending Look says, "Who was that?" No, literally, Nicaragua Expat Life. That's the name of the show. I assume you're asking, who was it that did that? That's the name of the show. I have no idea what his actual name is. I don't know if he's actually in Nicaragua. He has done filming in a courtyard that looks like Nicaragua, but he doesn't have the most casual information for someone who had ever been here. So he makes a video series where he gives advice on living in Nicaragua, but doesn't, like, he said things like, "Oh, if you want to do a border run, you go to the Honduran border." How long does someone live in Nicaragua before they know that that's not a border that resets your visa, right? Sure, everyone on their first day thinks it will. Obviously, but it's, the most common myths. These are the things that you expect people who are talking about it to have figured out right away. And so, like, his show claims that he doesn't know where the borders are. He claims he doesn't know how the border runs work. He claims he doesn't know about residency. He claims he doesn't know about citizenship, but he also claims to be a show giving the information about all these things. Every single thing is completely wrong, and in completely ridiculous ways, right? It would be like any one of us suddenly being like, you know what, we're going to give advice on how to live in Mozambique without even being sure where it is, right? Well, I heard that name in a cartoon one time, Animaniacs probably, and so I decided to give advice on it. I'm not going to look it up or check anything or ask anyone or go there. I'm just going to start, but I'm going to pretend I'm there and pretend I've done research so that it's a place where no one else is giving information. So hopefully I'll get some attention. That's what it's like, right? He's giving advice when you don't have the casual information that a normal person would have by watching the information that is out there before you move, right? Meaning, like, my show, Elton's show, so many shows just on YouTube. I mean, there's so many ways to research, but just on YouTube, the most casual research would tell you, here's the things to look out for, right? Honduras is not a border. Border runs are easy. Residency requires this type of funding, which you clearly have. Citizenship isn't an option and has this path you have to follow. So yeah, it could be false information, but everybody has the same false information. So at least if you got to check that, right? Well, everyone thinks you have to be a resident before you become a citizen. Is that true? Oh, it's right in the published law that's public. There's no way to get that wrong because it's a public law, right? And he just acted like that wasn't the case and completely ignored the fact that it was a easily verified fact that you have to move to Nicaragua, become a temporary resident, become a permanent resident, and then get either the president or the National Assembly to approve you regardless. Glossed over the whole thing. Ignored the last part completely. He ignored every requirement that existed and just did this like, it's hard because my lawyer is an idiot. And no, if you're telling the truth, your lawyer scammed you straight up, and you did no research, none, didn't check anything. He claims he paid a lawyer for a year, claims he's married to a Nicaraguan, has a Nicaraguan family. I mean, either he's just a straight up crook, or every single person in his life is scamming him. It has to be, right? The amount that he's not in reality is so extreme. There's no plausible way it's accidental, right? Either he's fabricating the information, or an entire framework around him is keeping him in a bubble, and for some reason misleading him about every single thing. But he's making claims like he went to Migracion and asked questions and got the wrong information. But you don't go ever in any country to the police and ask them the processes for things, right? I mean, for reporting a stolen phone, of course you do. But for I want to apply for citizenship, do you go to the police? No, you do not. You go to a lawyer or you look up the law and you follow the process. You don't go to the police and go, would you do this for me? I don't feel like paying a lawyer, so you have to work for me. They're just going to go, no, get out of here, right? We all know that. That's just basic adulting, right? But so he's going to the wrong sources, asking, I'm sure, the wrong question, right? And because, if you say to me, I have an online business, does that qualify for a rentista? Of course it does. I shouldn't even have to answer that for you. But I understand loads of Americans don't understand English, and rentista is not a word that many English speakers know, even though it's an English word. Okay, and not very many Americans, even those in business, understand business terms. He claims to own a business and that he doesn't know basic business terms. That's normal, but that's the claim. But who do you ask? Well, you don't ask some random person who is not there to give you the information. You ask someone who knows, right? Go to any number of shows like mine. Just happens to be that I have the show that answers every single thing he got wrong, everything his family and lawyer misled him on, every one of them is published and watched by Migration. And he could have just watched it and said, my lawyer lied to me. My family lied to me. I made a video lying about every single thing that I said, right? He could have checked that. And if he truly thought I was wrong, he could have started the video and say, unlike every single YouTuber I can find and the published law and common sense, I think all of them and those things are wrong. So I'm going to say, you can say that, right? I can say, I don't think the United States is a real country. I think it's imagined and we're all delusional. And there's actually just water up there. I know that all the maps say it's there. I know that there's tons of people who've been there or think they've been there. I know I grew up there, but I think we all hallucinated it, right? If I want to preface something like that, then you can be like, okay, you're out of your mind, but you're acknowledging the fact that you're saying something extreme that no one's going to agree with. But he's pretending that he's not disagreeing with the police, the published law, every single YouTube channel. He's just ignoring all of it and then acting like there's this completely insane advice that is not connected to anything. Agadir was nice. Go see Rhodesia. We're carrying signs now. Surprise, it's raining on the Oregon coast. It was pretty before an hour ago, partly cloudy. Samantha's here. Hi, happy to be here. Lending Look says, I just went to see his channel. He does show his face on video. Yes, he does. It does look like Nicaragua in the 3 vids I've seen. It looks like Nicaragua. Yes, I agree. Everything sounds like he's in Nicaragua, except the content doesn't make any sense if he's ever been to Nicaragua. Not at all. He doesn't know anything about the flights, the transit, nothing. Not the slightest thing. He doesn't know the distance between things. Lending says, so is he offering financial services? That's the weird thing. He's not. But that's where the really good ones are. If you really want... So here's the problem, but this is right. This is why it works. If you want the most nefarious propaganda, right, you don't make it then try to make money. Because people quickly go, oh, I see. He'll say anything to get paid. Sure. But if something is like, oh, the government is paying you to do something, then you don't advertise as paid for by the government, right? As paid for by the nation of Canada, as paid for by the British government, right? You don't do that, right? Because unless they want to promote it, right? Well, we paid for a classical music performance. We want the people to know that the government paid for it. Okay, then they're advertising. But if they're putting out propaganda, that's not what they do. They say these things and don't tell them we're paying you. Okay. And there's such deep pockets for that and such incentive to do that we assume it is expected that several governments will pay for that to happen on a regular basis. So that content like this should exist from foreign governments is the assumption. Is he doing that for that reason? We have no way to know. If he's good at it, we will not have a good way to guess other than the lack of evidence that it's not. But we know that it's the expected normal thing so that it comes up when nothing else makes sense. You can't explain his behavior from wanting to be helpful. You can't explain his behavior from wanting to have a good YouTube channel that grows. You can't explain from him honestly trying to help anybody. You can't explain it from him trying to be a good person. Like, you can't explain any reason he would do this. Either you're stuck with like he's completely delusional and doesn't realize it. He actively hates Nicaragua or expats here and wants to harm people. He actively just hates people, right? And just lies and tries to mislead people just because it's funny to him. Or someone is incentivizing him in order to do this. It could be he's being paid. It could be he's being threatened. It could be he has a crime that is not being prosecuted as long as he plays along, right? There's any number of ways, especially that a government can coerce someone. And so, no, he's not offering any services that I can find whatsoever, which probably makes it the worst case scenario. And which of those things is better or worse? That a government is convincing him or pressuring him to do something bad? That he's just pure evil and thinks it's funny to be evil? Or that he's so dumb that he thinks he knows things that he has no reason to think he knows anything about? I don't know which is worse. They're all pretty bad. So that's why we don't want to be like it must be this, because no matter what we say, it's pretty awful. Tusk says, "Hey Scott, it's good to see you." Ron says, "Sam, just accept it. Some people are dumb. Some people are dumb, but dumb doesn't normally make sense for things like this." He's so adamant and puts in so much effort to really carefully trying to dismantle things. Dumb doesn't make sense. If it was isolated, right, and it was like, oh, I got scammed by my family and lawyer, and they're depleting my pockets, you could see them being like, oh, everyone else is wrong. You should clear it up for everybody, right? And because the things he's doing risk him being deported, right? Falsifying information about the government is a crime, right? Intentionally misleading people to harm the nation is a crime in Nicaragua, and as it should be in any country, right? You shouldn't be allowed to just do harm for the fun of it. And so this easily is, if this was in isolation, is easily his, I don't know, wife, lawyer, in-laws think it's funny to get him set up for deportation, right? Oh, convince him that he's got to go back to the U.S. to work for a little bit, call Migracion, show them the videos, and be like, this Yahoo is clearly here to cause damage. He didn't check any of these things. He straight up lied all over the place. Don't let him back in. And and they probably have several things like this, right? We were just seeing one piece in isolation. They probably have evidence of multiple things that they've set him up for, if that's the case. But if that was the case, we would see it in isolation. What we saw from the things he posted on my videos was that he was very well at articulating a lot of counterpoints. And sometimes he did have points which suggest government training, because the things he was aware of was trying to dismantle concepts like legal constructs by making legal arguments, right? And they're not necessarily wrong. So he would say he was using legal arguments to try to come up with what was formal or what was informal, what was a legal framework versus what was not a legal framework. And I'm not saying he didn't have any basis for some of those arguments. He did. I think they're wrong. That's why I argued against them. But that doesn't mean that I'm right. It just means that I think I'm right, right? That's a very clear distinction. But he at least made reasoned arguments for the most part, normally with carefully chosen lies in the middle, because the arguments didn't quite hold up on their own, but with the lies that he would insert, they would hold up, right? So it showed the signs of intelligent engineering to the argument. Someone was trained on it. And so because we saw a argument being made by someone who appeared to have training, combined with then him making videos where everything showed complete disregard for common sense and common knowledge, that suggests that all of it was intentional. It's very hard to assume that. So when making the video about his citizenship and the things that affected him, he claimed to have not even the casual passing knowledge that anybody on the street would have. But when trying to make an argument about things that didn't affect him and there's no reason for him to know even slightly about, he would pull out detailed legal arguments that I still feel were wrong, but were at a completely different degree. He knew how to look up the law, he knew how to quote the law, he knew how to apply the law, until it came to things that he should have been putting in a lot of effort to over a long period of time, and then suddenly none of that applied. That inconsistency, I think, rules out almost certainly that he was dumb, which was the only situation where there was any possible passing excuse. Don Juego. So how does one from the north find a place to rent for 4 to 6 weeks to go to visit Nicaragua without paying gringo prices? Quite honestly, you can't. 4 to 6 weeks, anything under 6 months is only for gringos. And this is not. So actually, this is I should do a video on this. This is not gringo pricing. It is gringo influenced pricing, but it's because between the hotel length, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and 6 months is a gringo period. It is a period of time that only gringos need housing. And so there's only one set of pricing for that period, and it's gringo pricing. But there isn't Nicaraguan pricing to compete with it, if that makes sense. Nicaraguans do not do that. They would always take a 6-month place. Nicaraguans rarely move around the country and don't move to the country for obvious reasons. They're Nicaraguans. They already live here. So this isn't necessarily like gringos being gringos. No, it's gringos come from abroad. People from abroad have needs that are different than people who live here. This short-term housing, right, short-term rental, furnished rentals is extremely unnecessary under normal circumstances in the country. Almost no one, including expats, does it. And so the number of people who need it is much smaller than the number of expats in the country, right? So if you say, well, we have a total of 5,000, 10,000 expats in the whole country, what percentage of those ever needed short-term rentals? And you say probably only about 25%. So only 2,500 short-term rentals have been needed over the course of 5 years in a country, right? And I'm not throwing around like weird small numbers. These are realistic numbers for the entire national market, right? Our actual number of expats is so low. And, like I've never had a short-term rental like that. Almost no one I know has ever had a short-term rental like that. But I do know people from the channel who have gotten them, and there's good reasons to want them. There's nothing wrong with wanting it. That's an absolutely sensible thing to want. But you're in such a niche that there isn't a market to support that. So if you look at the Airbnbs that offer that, you'll find that the average Airbnb has never been rented or has been rented like one time. So the Airbnb people aren't making any money. In general, there's just no market in that. There's a few that make money for sure, but in general, people just aren't making it. And so it's just hard. But gringo prices are unfortunately the way that it will go. If you find something else, you'll be extremely lucky. The best cases we find 4 to 6 weeks. That's Airbnb. Right? Nothing's realistically going to be Airbnb. You can go for month or month plus pricing in Airbnb. It'll be way lower than normal Airbnb pricing, but it'll be much higher than what we generally consider market pricing, what people perceive as market pricing here in Nicaragua. And this is a tough one because like Costa Rica has loads of short-term housing. That's a very normal thing in Costa Rica. Like everybody does it, right? Like it's just an everyday thing. There must be 50,000 units that do that in Costa Rica, and they all stay busy, or almost all stay busy. And then you flip that in Nicaragua, it's like there's none, and no one uses them. No one cares. And the reason that no one cares is because if you're here for less than 2 months, we're just in Airbnb or in hotels, and we just use that time to get our 6 or 12-month rentals, depending on what you're looking for. And once you get that, we get unfurnished long-term, and our prices are so low that even if we ended up bailing at 3 months, say I took a 6-month rental, I paid for the furnishing, I decided after 3 months I had to leave, suddenly, well, it's not like I paid more than a short term would have been. And so it's a really sensible risk, right? That getting into that long term is where the prices really come down. And so, yeah, sadly, I mean, you may get lucky. There's 1 or 2 out there. But they are so rare. Lending Look says he is probably faking it till he makes it. Probably he will give out real information later as he learns. His claim, though, is that he's been in the process for years, right? Well, at least over a year. Over a year? Like Luke came, Luke, who has his own channel and is on here often. Luke came and had his residency in weeks, right? And doesn't have family here. Had visited previously in the years past, but just a little bit. And had his residency done in weeks. This guy has had this video out long enough that he should have gotten residency since the video. And in the video, he claimed he had over a year of working on his citizenship. And he doesn't have, and I mean this literally, he doesn't have the knowledge of the first 5 minutes of citizenship research, which is, for pretty much any country, what does it take to get citizenship there? Let me jump on Wikipedia and see if there's a starting point. And Wikipedia has all the information you would need. It's not completely accurate. It's not completely up to date, but it does give you all the things you actually need to know about citizenship, to know that you can't go get a lawyer. You can't work on it before you get other things. Like, all of the things that he needs to know were all there in the first web search, right? All you do is open up a browser and grab that first link. And that's where he hasn't gotten yet. Right? And so I don't think he's faking it till he makes it, because he isn't attempting to make it at all. He's not making the slightest effort. Brian says, we're all just aliens on a planet. Ron says, adios. Brian says, I just switched over and watched him for 2 minutes. Just got a weird vibe. It's weird. He doesn't come across as like creepy, but he does come across as strange. Something's definitely up with it. Lenny Look says, why are embassies different sizes? Like in Managua, there's tiny embassies and enormous ones. What could there possibly be going on to justify so many offices in a country like this? So it does vary a lot. So the United States has a very large office here because they traditionally... So one, very importantly, embassies are often not custom built. As an example, the U.S. Embassy here is not built for the United States. It was built for another purpose. The United States leases it. And so its size is not determined by the needs of the U.S. All it is that the U.S. needs a certain amount of space. This had that or more, and so they have it, right? So it's not indicative of anything. But the United States, as an example, because I do use the embassy here, I just started using it, and they've been great, provides consular services to a large number of expats. So U.S. citizens often need things like passport handling and stuff like that. The U.S. has an exceptionally large office because it processes enormous numbers of visas going one direction or the other on a scale almost no other country here does. So the U.S. actually has, if you go into the U.S. Embassy or look at a satellite, I'm sure you can see this, it has an outdoor seating area that can seat, I'm sure, 200 people, maybe more. Definitely more standing, but like actually in nice seats in a nice area with public bathrooms and ATM and and fans and stuff. Like it's pretty nice, and then that's going to see at least 200 people waiting to get in the doors for visa interviews, presumably. As an American, we use it for passport control. Well, there's a lot of Americans who need passport services, so it gets used for that quite a bit. And then they have whole sections that do things like collect information on the country, have embassy services with the country and so forth. It's how they maintain communications in a lot of cases. So the U.S. has a very large one, as does Russia. Russia has a very large embassy here, not as big as the U.S. Embassy, but in a much nicer neighborhood. They do a lot of business together, right? So a lot of business development, a lot of cultural stuff is handled by the embassy. So one of my best friends is an embassy worker, used to be with Canada, now with the UK. And she doesn't work in either of those countries, right? She works in another country. And she helps with a lot of scheduling things and parties, and there's like all these social events that Canada and the UK do in the country that they're in. And so she sometimes has to go to events to represent them. She has to organize other people going to events. She has to, all kinds of really weird things you would never think of. Embassies do that from time to time. So you could have an entire staff of people that like host parties. That's realistic. China does a tremendous amount of work with Nicaragua, both at the government level and business level. And so they have a huge embassy complex with loads of people that work on that stuff. Germany as well. And keep in mind, many of these countries provide logistics services. They provide educational services. They provide medical services. Japan provides a hospital in Grenada. China provides a floating hospital off the coast. Germany provides a really large educational facility, and so forth, right? So they do a lot of things that may not seem like an embassy job, but they're coming from the government of that country. And so the embassy is the natural place where the staff and the coordination and the offices and the storage and so forth for those things happen. Guatemala has a really large one on the Carretera Messiah. But then other countries often have no embassy at all, or a very tiny one. If you're Algeria, I have not seen their embassy. Could be enormous, but I bet it's not. Generally, they're handling just, they have one person processing the tiniest amount of paperwork, right? There's no logistics, shipping goods between Nicaragua and Algeria. There's no need to process Nicaraguan visas to go to Algeria or vice versa. It's just not happening. And so that they have embassies in each country is more symbolic than anything. Sure, they keep a line of communications open. It helps symbolize that the countries are friendly towards each other and they're trying to look for opportunities to do things. But ultimately, the amount that they're doing isn't very much. I guarantee the entire Algerian embassy does less work than the U.S. does simply updating people's passports. There's just so many more Americans in the country to deal with. Don Huego says, and thanks for your channel and passion to educate and share real info. Well, thank you very much. He says, lending looks, embassy size is generally related to the amount of business and expats from that country in the host country and how much budget they have for it. Budget, obviously, is definitely a factor that I should have said. U.S., Germany, and China certainly maintain huge showcase embassies just to showcase how much they can, right? That is a factor. Lending look says, I figured that may have a role, but I see Nicaragua is not a hotspot destination for Russians, and the building for Russia here is pretty substantial. So it's not necessarily a hotspot for Russians, but I think it's more than you realize. Russians here on the ground is pretty significant, but Don Huego does point out, and I'll just back this up once he's there. He says Russia has a significant budget and interest in Nicaragua, historically their foothold in Central America. Lenin says, be nice if there were Russian flights to here and vice versa. That would be super nice. That is really far and quite difficult to do. Russia, so I used to live in Kiev, which is just miles off the Russian border, and to fly Kiev to the Northeast U.S., Boston, New York, is long flights. Certainly doable, it's not a problem, but they're long flights. But when you move to the real Russian cities, I don't mean to imply their border cities are not real, but you know what I mean, Moscow, St. Petersburg, and similar, Novgorod, those flights, even to the U.S., are hours longer than the Ukrainian flights to the U.S. And then when you consider going to Central America, you're talking much farther west, right? We're under like Indiana, Louisiana. So you're going halfway across the U.S. almost westward, and then going south, because Russia's in the north, all this way south to we're in line with North Africa. And so when you think about it from that perspective, it's like, oh yeah, no, a flight from Moscow to Nicaragua is twice the flight that was already long from Kiev to New York. Okay, there's that's not a realistic flight to have. Just it's not at all. So from a pure airplane logistics perspective, we're not going to have those flights. We'd almost do better getting flights direct from Vladivostok, which obviously is not going to happen. But would be cool. I would do that. But Don Huego says, Russia has a significant budget, so that's a big one. Russia's a big, rich country, so they're showing off in that way. And historically, we're their foothold in Central America. So that's very true. We are the primary Russian embassy for all of Central America. We're their primary point of contact throughout the region. And we have the Russian nuclear landing strip at Punta Huete, right, is here in Nicaragua. So they have the Russian satellite monitoring station is here and other things, right? So Russia, while they don't have a huge tourism business with Nicaragua, they do have a reasonably noticeable expat population in the country and very heavy military and logistics where plausible interaction, right? So Russia does have a presence here. Is the embassy maybe a little bit larger than it needs for that? Maybe it's just showing off. But when you can have a high rise in Las Colinas, you do. I've had short-term rentals for Nica prices, but you have to connect with locals a lot. Don Huego says, thanks for the info. That makes sense on short-term housing is tourist-focused. really is. But you might get lucky, right? They're out there. There's very, very rare. Brian says, what happened to that lot that you were going to build on a few blocks from the beach, but not the beach lot? Build it and rent it out. Yeah, so that's the problem. I have had short-term rentals, and renting it out was impossible. We lost so much money. I mean, it wasn't that much money, but as a percentage of the money we put in, we lost way too much and said, this is not worth it at all, which is, I think, what pretty much everyone says, right? If you have a place and try to do short-term rentals, you're going to find that you have to charge so much that it feels like gringo prices, or you're going to not make anything and it's going to be a waste of your effort. And so as someone from the other side, there's no financial incentive to offer them. And I'm a person who easily could and has in the past. Lending says it's hard to get housing in Blue. Oh, you're saying that as a statement. It's hard to get housing in Bluefield. I bet it. Yeah, very small place, very remote. Negrito Pinolero. A year ago, we visited Nicaragua for 2 weeks. The Airbnb apartment that we rented with a kitchenette with air conditioners and pool for $30 a night. Wow, that is cheap. Most places in the country, if you have air conditioning, the air conditioning can cost the people who have the property more than $30 a night. I can tell you, right, as someone who has rental properties and has done this for years, having a rental unit top $1,000 a month in AC usage is normal. And so if you think about it, $30 per night in AC is only $900. So if we're hitting $1,000, $30 a night wouldn't necessarily, and I mean this in the last month, I have had single rooms top $1,100 in power, right? So if you're not charging $2,000 for a month if you have AC, it's easy to actually come out negative. And partially it's because people run AC nonstop. When it's not theirs and they don't pay for the power, they just turn it on all the time and crank it. Whereas those of us who live here, right, I've got AC on right now, but it's a very efficient unit. I only turn it on when I'm using it, and I set it to a reasonable temperature. Reasonable temperature for someone who lives here all the time. And I'm very careful about keeping the door closed and lots of other things. When you're paying the electric, you treat the electric very differently than when it's free and unlimited. Negrito says the owners had 4 apartments available and would have been willing to rent by the month at a better price. Oh my gosh, how could they possibly do that? Russia does have flights to Cuba direct. That's why I feel it's possible. Cuba is significantly closer to, I mean, it's not impossible. There are planes that can go that far, but it does get much more expensive. The distance from us to Cuba is non-trivial. They're not far away, but they are not around the corner as much as it seems like maybe they are. Let me grab a distance on that. It is 1,300 kilometers farther, right? Now, it's not that far, right? When you leave Miami, you pretty much leave Miami and go immediately over Cuba. But Miami to here is 2 hours and 15 minutes by a normal commercial airline. So a Russian flight getting to Cuba would have roughly 2 hours additional to go. So 2 additional hours is not the end of the world. But it is far. When we're really excited that we're getting flights to Madrid, we're talking 8,500 kilometers. Okay, and that's a really big deal that we're talking about flights that are so far. If they were to put in flights to Algeria, that'd be 9,200. I'd really like it if they put in flights to like Burkina Faso, and that would only be 9,200 as well. It's really weird the way that the distances move on the map. If they went direct to Malawi, where my office is, that's actually closer than Europe from here. Only 8,100. Oh, I'm sorry. No. I got that completely wrong. I switched to miles. It is 13,200 kilometers. But now, if you want to go to Moscow, suddenly you're looking at 11,000 kilometers, which, yeah, we can do, right? Obviously, long-haul flights do that stuff all the time. but you're getting pretty far, right? Moscow to us is just shorter than Tokyo to us. Um, and we don't have flights to that part of the world, right? The nearest that we can get flights to there are up in Mexico. So the flights from Mexico to Tokyo are 1,000 kilometers closer than Nicaragua to Moscow. And so that is, and that's there's only like one flight for there. If you're talking about the flights from Los Angeles to Tokyo, which is much more common, what people do, that's just over 8,000. So those give you a little bit of an idea of just how far everything is from Nicaragua because we're so far west and so far south. We're just pretty isolated. It's sad. We would like to be closer to some things sometimes. So hold on. Let me just compare. So we think of Buenos Aires as being pretty far. That's only 6,000 kilometers, and that's a really long flight. My office in Bolivia is only 3,900 kilometers. Heading down to Bogota, 1,300 kilometers, right? Someone had mentioned Caracas, 2,300 kilometers, and so forth. Do you find Santo Domingo apartment rent prices reasonable? They are all over the place. So they're generally really expensive. It's highly desirable, and there's very few of them, right? The total number of apartments there is not high. Everything is special. I do rent in Santo Domingo all the time, and I spend over $100 a night. But that's with air conditioning included, pool included, and I find them on the high side, of course. But I think that they're reasonable considering I'm getting an entire, the last time I rented an apartment it was about 105, 110 per night. 2 full bedrooms, 2.5 bath, dining room, 2-story house, living room, TV with Ethernet, not Wi-Fi, Ethernet. Plus there's Wi-Fi, of course. Really good customer service. I really like the place that we use. Is it expensive? Yes, but we're not, when I'm saying it could cost $1,000 a month to have one unit, that's a single master suite with one air conditioning unit can drive up over 1,000. And when I'm renting in Santo Domingo, I always have at least 2 air conditioning units, if not 3. And we will use them, right? Because you're cooling this big space. Easily, I'm using $20 to $40 of electric during my stay. When you're like, this is a luxury apartment, 2 bedrooms, 3 bath, they got to pay for water, electric, all those things. Yeah, they might be looking at $30 to $40. Yeah, suddenly it's a very reasonable price. Are they making money? Of course they are. But they also have to cover when the place is empty, which is a lot of the time. So at least the ones that I use, I find them reasonable as a person who might rent them out. Lending Look says, electric bill costs as much as some rent. In a lot of cases, it costs more than the rent. It really can. Expat says, hello, reminds everyone to give a thumbs up. Thank you. Lending Look says, yeah, but are those direct? They always connect to Miami to Madrid, Spain. It's nice. No, we're getting direct, right? That's our big deal. Through Miami is useless to us, right? So in the United States, people tend to talk about, and this is just a cultural thing because you're within a country. You always talk about flights within the country connecting to something that then goes to where you're going, right? So if you're flying from, say, Duluth, and you're going to go to Europe, it goes without saying that it's going to stop in New York or Boston or Washington, D.C. When we're going from Nicaragua, it goes without saying that we mean we're going to drive to Managua and fly from there, right? It's not going to go from Leon. It's not going to go from Bluefields. It's going to go from Managua. But when we say that we have flights going somewhere, we always mean direct, right? And that's why we list the only places that we fly from here are Havana, Miami, Houston, Mexico City, San Salvador, Chepe Town, and Panama City. Right, that is it. That's our total list of places that we fly from Nicaragua. But of course, from those destinations, you can fly almost anywhere. So from Mexico City, you can fly to Tokyo. Yeah, of course. From Miami, you can fly to London. Of course. From Havana, you can fly to Moscow. Of course, right, or to Caracas. And so we don't speak in those terms. Um, because you can fly anywhere in the world from here if you get the right connection. Um, but Iberia is doing Managua to Madrid. And we're told actually before Punta Huete is open. So possibly later this year, we're going to have the flights to Madrid from here. Now, what are they going to cost? I don't know. I've not seen pricing on them yet. And of course, flights everywhere are going up in price right now, which is sad. But direct to Madrid is freaking fantastic because Madrid is one of my two favorite European cities, the other being Rome. My wife's favorite is Barcelona, but I much prefer my time in Madrid. I love Barcelona, don't get me wrong, but Madrid is such a good city. Like, and I've worked in Madrid. I've had an office in Madrid in the past. I've driven Madrid. I've never driven Barcelona. And my company has offices in Lisbon. And all of those are very easy. You fly into Madrid. Madrid is the high-speed train hub of the region. So you can get everywhere in Spain from Madrid just like that. It is so easy. And even Lisbon, so easy. And even the south of France or Paris or Rome are pretty easy, even though the trains start to get pretty far. But anything short of Paris is like just meaning closer, like Leon or whatever, so easy from Madrid and so cheap from Madrid. It really opens up that part of Europe to us. Like it makes it feel like it's around the corner in a way that a lot of other places do not. When I go from, if I want to go to South America, I've got to get down to Costa Rica, and then I have to hop through somewhere. And that getting down to Costa Rica really kind of adds this extra layer. But going to I'm just going to have my driver drop me off at the airport, or I'm just going to take the shuttle to the airport in Managua. I'm going to hop on this plane and magically I'm in Spain. Oh my gosh, right? Like that's different. And that's why what I really want is LATAM, the airlines, to come into Managua and give me that direct to Lima. If they could cut off that stop in Chepe town in Costa Rica, would be just amazing. I'd be in South America all the time because LATAM flights in South America, I can get around South America for $200. Lending Look says, what made you select those areas for offices? Specifically, which areas are you talking about? Was that me mentioning Lisbon? He also says, if I apply for an e-visa to Spain, how good is it for? How long is it? The time it's good for? I actually don't know. I haven't had to do the e-visa. I used to live in Spain, but we didn't need it back then. It's been 11 years. And I hung out in Spain in 2019, but I was still pre-e-visa. I've not needed it. I don't know. I bet it's good for a year, but it could be good for a week. I don't know. I know that the process is supposed to be quick and easy. Like, it's not supposed to be a hard thing. You shouldn't be challenged by it. And you can apply really quickly and you get an answer really quickly, like a couple days. So other than a little bit of planning, I don't think it's going to be any annoyance or real problem. But it is one of those things where, if you just had that Nicaraguan passport, you wouldn't need the e-visa anymore. That's just for the Americans. The Nicaraguans don't need it, which is another reason we want that flight, because it's so many Nicaraguans are going to be like, oh, now this is cheap and easy. It's always been all but impossible because it's almost every flight. There's ways around it, right? Panama City or whatever. But most of the good flights that go up to Miami. So you have to have that U.S. transit visa, which is both expensive and nearly impossible to get. And then you have to pay to be at the airport in Miami, which generally is going to cost you a bit, right? It's just an expensive airport and an extra airport, right? Panama is an expensive airport too. If you can avoid an extra airport, it saves you money. And those flights directly to Spain, if they're anything reasonable at all, are going to be so much cheaper for Nicaraguans. And it's such a game changer. It's one of the reasons my kids are like, maybe we want to live in Spain for a while. They're getting old enough to be looking at their own places. And they have wonderful memories of Spain. My office is in Bolivia. So that one's actually funny. So Bolivia is fantastic. Let's start with that. Love Bolivia. But we ended up there because we had long been in. So we first went into Nicaragua 10 years ago, and went into Mexico like 8 or 9 years ago. And so we had been. And Panama similarly. So we had been in this region for some time and had never looked at South America. It's a little bit complicated if you're a company with no particular connections in a region. Any region is difficult if you haven't been there. And my eldest daughter's best friends from La Paz, right? She's Bolivian, and her father works in the same field that most of our company is, and so he heard that we were hiring, and he said, "Hey, I've got a lot of friends in my field back home in Bolivia. Do you want me to put out some feelers?" And we're like, "Yeah." So we ended up hiring entry level positions for the company down in La Paz, and kind of kicked it off. And got started there. And it was just a really wonderful experience. Ended up getting a couple senior managers in both La Paz and Cochabamba. And that really we kind of organically expanded into Bolivia. But Bolivia is the Silicon Valley of South America. So the number of English speakers, the number of high tech people and so forth that exist there is really good for us. And so it just has turned into our main base. So Bolivia now, for most of a decade, has been the hub of our company, and continues to be. It's every time that we say we're hiring somewhere, chances are we've hired one or more positions in Bolivia for every position that we hire outside of Bolivia. That's, I think, pretty much true. So, and of the recs we have on the books to potentially open, does that make sense? Not recs we have open. We have recs that are believed to probably open this year. It's something like 80% of them will be Bolivia only. And then the other 20% are Bolivia optional. I don't know any that are non-Bolivian, but as many as 20% of them are not necessarily Bolivia. But 80% of them are Bolivia required because they're in a physical office location. They have to be co-located with the rest of the team. And so Bolivia gets, under normal circumstances, roughly every other person in the company. And for those who don't know, we're in U.S., Mexico, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Belize, Panama, Argentina, and Portugal and Malawi. Right? It's we're all over the place. Make sure my Malawi office is working right now. So I'm just checking. All's good. All's well. There was a question. Where was it? What determines the airline company's decision to allow Madrid direct flights? Let's say it's one way. How much are Managua to Madrid? So we have no way to know. That's what I'm saying. We don't have prices yet because they haven't opened the flights, but they're supposed to open this year. The decision is based on where they think traffic will be. Right now, the things that are going on between Nicaragua and Spain are that Spain is the most powerful current economy in Europe, and Nicaragua is the most powerful or most successful economy in the West. And so the fact that one is a colony of the other, or traditionally, that they're friendly nations that are constantly doing business, that they are currently politically aligned very well, that they are both currently in an expansion, thriving economic position, it makes sense that they would be looking at each other as this is a spot that has been a gap and probably shouldn't still be a gap, right? Both are looking at doing more business with each other. Both are looking at each other as tourist destinations. Spain is pivoting away from North America in every possible sense. Spain wants to see Central and South American tourist more. They want to encourage that path, and they are specifically making it easier for Latinos to go directly to Spain, and specifically making it harder for North Americans to go to Spain. They're not making it that you can't, but they started this e-visa thing, for example, and now, right, U.S. military can't even fly over Spanish airspace, and the same thing, they can't fly over Nicaraguan airspace, which is why we see them off the coast going as close as they can, trying to skirt by. Nica Flow 89, what's good, Expat fam? Hey, Nica Flow, how's it going? Expat says Madrid was so much fun. Madrid is. That is a really, really cool town. All right, if you go to Iberia's website, they do list Managua. but they don't list when flights start. So heaven only knows. How do you... Let's just see what it says. It's probably going to say there's nothing. I can only imagine. But I've seen the announcements. They do have official announcements that they are opening the path, but that's all we have. Scott, man, I need a favor from you. One that should make you and I some money. I want this to sound as scammy as possible. Thanks. Lending looks, that's incredible. So it's never been done before. Madrid to Managua, no. To the best of my knowledge, never done before. Okay. So the first flight that came up at $4,610. All right, I'm not taking that. All right, but they are listing outbound flights. So I looked in December. I grabbed December flights, and they're showing one way at $729. That's for economy, I assume. 702, that's the lowest price I've seen so far. This is still December. I'm trying to see if we can figure out when they first schedule these flights. It only allows me to move one day at a time. This is going to be a very slow process. So far, all through November, $729, 702 again. That seems to be the range for economy. What code can I use? You as a referral for NVO's Fast Track. Apparently we get $5 each. Oh, I had no idea. Tell them it's me. I mean, they know me by name for sure. But I can ask them. But I can't ask them right now. It's Sunday night. They're closed. But I'm sure I'll be talking to them tomorrow. Anyway, I talk to them almost weekly. Expat says, when I was in Spain, I could not even walk down the street without being offered some booze. It was a wonderful feeling. That's awesome. All right, I'm all the way to October now. Still seeing the same prices. It seems like 702 is the low and 729 is the high for available low prices on a given day basis for that path, right? So I just clicked on the 9th of October, and it is showing, can this be real? Leave Managua at 3 p.m., leave Managua at 9:25 a.m., leave Managua, So they're using, these have stops. These are not direct. That's why the price is so high. Okay. We don't know when their direct is going to start because they're offering through Iberia flights with a stop in the middle. I bet it's San Salvador. Nope, there's Miami. Ugh. Well, that's scammy. They're all going through Miami, so these are not real. When are they opening the flight path? Skyscanner says from 484, but that's always just made up. Yeah, there's no way to look up the news. Airlines are like video game companies. Their news is very secretive for no obvious reason. Is $2,000 a month a good living wage in Madrid? It's going to be low, but it's not going to be unlivable. Madrid is very affordable. Will we feel the effects of the war in terms of the economy here in Nicaragua? No. We've not been affected in the slightest. Ever use Codex? A lot. I'm betting it. I bet letting it do all my VA work for me, taking over my screen and doing heavy work. I don't let it take over my screen. I actually don't use Codex directly too often. I like it. I connect Codex to JetBrains Air and use it that way, and I'm very happy with it. In fact, it's running in my background right now as we're doing stuff. I am working on projects. I always have it open doing stuff. I actually have to have extra credits because I run through every possible credit you can imagine. And that reminds me to go do a code check-in. And Yes, I've been very happy with Codex in general. They seem to be really have figured that out, done an excellent job with it, and it's available here. Um, for anyone who is interested in Claude, they block Nicaragua for some reason, which is just incredibly rude because there's no reason for them to have done that. Um, just just them as a company letting their personal politics become part of their business decisions. If I was an investor there, I would consider it theft. Um, yeah, long term, we don't expect to feel the effects of the war. For one, we're not dependent on fuel, so we really don't care from a fuel perspective, but also um, we get access to our fuel supply. This is what I'm told. Is that ours comes in from China and they're getting it from the pipeline from Iran. So whatever's going on in the world, our oil path just keeps going the same as always. Um, and it comes right in offshore. So we're very isolated from a lot of this stuff, which is fantastic. Right. And just like we're not affected at all or in any noticeable way by like the US tariff thing going on, like which obviously was designed to harm Americans and was never meant to be felt in the rest of the world, but big countries with huge levels of commerce with the US would feel it. We do technically feel it here, but we don't feel it in the sense that prices have gone up. We feel it in the sense that the products available on the market have shifted away from the US. So we've actually seen higher quality, lower cost products starting to flood the market because the US tariff and unknown tariff, right, whether it's the high tariffs or just the fear of tariffs, have caused vendors to stop being lazy and start saying, okay, we can't trust these paths for things. We have to have an alternative. What do we do? And it's kind of like the frog in boiling water, right? You start off and say, well, we built up this freight forwarder system from the United States. Oh, the prices are going up in the U.S. a little bit. We've been doing this for a long time. I'm not going to change because of 5% change. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. But it may not be the cheapest. Yeah, it may not be the cheapest, but we're not going to, what are we going to save? 1%? How much work are we going to put into saving that 1%? Come on, it's not worth it. And they're right. But this tariff thing that the U.S. did feels, looking at it from the outside, it feels carefully orchestrated by someone to drive countries into China's arms for very logical, no one has to stop and think about it reasons that when you have tariff insecurity and you say, well, I don't know if the prices are going to be affordable tomorrow. I don't know what the prices are going to be. I don't know if I'm going to be able to beat my competition by buying ahead of time or waiting. I'm just guessing. I'm just rolling dice. Businesses don't want to roll dice. They want to be able to do analysis and make good decisions and try to outperform their competition, not just roll the dice and hope they're the ones who beat their competition, right? And so this tariff uncertainty has heavily driven countries like Nicaragua and the companies within the country to go, oh, if I buy from the US, I'm at great risk and possibly high cost just across the board. And if I now take the effort to buy from China instead, I'm guaranteeing no tariff rather than guaranteed high tariff with tariff uncertainty. I'm going to zero tariff with certainty. And instead of dealing with a very distant, shallow water port at Bilwi, I'm switching to the much closer deep water port at Corinto. Right? Just win and win and win. It's like, there's a lot of win here. Why didn't I do this earlier? Well, because earlier the difference was 1%. But now the difference could be 20%, 30%. And now the difference is not the companies that are entrenched win. Now it's the companies that make the logistics switch win. And so the companies who were resting on their laurels or whatever previously are now the ones that are either going out of business because they kept doing that, or they're the ones who are succeeding because they made the pivot to supply chains that make sense. And so what we see on the ground here is that we used to have reasonably priced computers, for example, that just barely cost more than the US if you knew how to shop. Whereas now we see computers and cars and appliances that are starting to be cheaper than you can get in the US, right? And that's an important shift. It used to be we had to get it through the US and we paid a tiny bit of overhead. Now we get it quite a bit cheaper even after we pay our overhead. So it used to be, oh, it's unfortunate that we have to pay this premium for things. Now it's, haha, we're one of the cheap countries. And an important differentiation. The computer that my company wants to standardize on, the Orange Pi Plus 32, something like that, costs $350 in the US and is very hard to get, and costs $250 in Bolivia and is very easy to get. So not only is one have a good supply chain that can just pick up the phone and order it, but it's $100 cheaper on a roughly $300 computer, right? That's a big differential. That's not a few extra dollars. That's 30 to 35% difference there. Claude is always banned. A VPN may fool it. So it's a weird question. Can you find a way to use it? Probably. Is it banned? Well, the ban is the ban, right? I have no interest in using Claude if that's, if their system is being used for nefarious purposes, and they think so little of their own product. I have very little interest in using it, so I'm not going out of my way to find any way to give them money, because that makes me very upset. But so if you're a developer, using products like Windsurf pull Claude from their US data centers. So Claude has no way, Anthropic doesn't know where you are. Windsurf knows where you are, but they hide that from Claude. They're not using a VPN. So if you're a company like mine, we can always use Claude through our US data centers. We don't need a VPN. I know we can fake it, right? Or fake where the people are. But it's still inconvenient. But they've made themselves out to by banning a country for no particular reason shows both that it's a political product, not a technical product, and that they're not a legitimate business. If you buy Suzuki cars or something, Suzuki is kind of the same price here. We don't get particularly great deals because our Suzukis come through the US. Japan does not have direct shipping to us. We've got a Suzuki sitting behind us. We do get Suzukis for $20K here, which is cheaper than the US, but that's not where the big savings are. But it is true, we get much better cars than the US now. So we get a bigger selection and higher quality cars at such better prices. So it's nice that we're actually getting, when I first moved here, everything was, we put up with the supply chain. Now it's like we're right on the cusp of this explosion of supply chain awesomeness. And there's so much now we're getting a better supply chain than everyone else. Now we're getting a better price than everyone else. It's really, really good. And it's funny because you hear all these Americans, I want to ship my car down. You want to pay double for a car and then pay double again to ship it? Like, that makes no sense. Come down here, get a deal in the first place. All right, let's go check some of this work I had going on, just see if things worked. I guarantee they did not work. Never does. Never does. I'm here. I'm just checking stuff. I'll be back with you guys in a second. Actually, where's my... I have so many things open, it's hard to... you heard correctly. I want to visit Russia and make a lot of friends. Did I... Oh. I've heard Russians are super friendly. I found that to be strange, as Europeans are described as being reserved. Is this a third world, Eastern world country vibe like Latin America? So Russia is Slavic. So like Ukraine isn't reserved, Romania isn't reserved, Bulgaria isn't reserved, Kosovo isn't reserved. They're not Slavic, but they're in that kind of general region. Germans and Italians and Spaniards and Brits and Scandinavians. So the Celtic, Romanian, Greco, Germanic world is reserved. Slavs are maybe more reserved than Latin Americans, but they're not reserved like a lot of Europeans. Expat says, I'm so disappointed that the used car market is gone. I mean, it's only gone because the new car market has gotten so good. Poorer countries are friendly. That's generally the case. D. Gilbert's here. Hey, Scott. X says, you heard correctly. I want to visit Russia and make a lot of friends. I mean, I used to live just off the Russian border. The area is fantastic, right? It's really nice over there. Gotta grab some logs here. Oh, cool. And where'd you guys go? Oh, another. Oh, an error. Speaking of codecs, they just went down from high demand again. For those who are using codecs and wondering about that, I just wanted to point out I am super happy with Kimi K 2.5. That has been consistently really good, which is kind of amazing. If you haven't played with it, it's surprising. Definitely not like Claude or codecs, but for its insanely low price, it is really impressive. We can give 95% of our workloads to that. It's been good, really good. It seems to be getting quiet around here. What's the chat level say? Yeah, 0 chat rate. YouTube is not impressed. We do have quite a few people on. All right. Well, if we're going to be real quiet, this is our Sunday night show, so we're not going all night. I am working. Oh, wait. I've heard Georgia isn't as friendly despite being beautiful and cheap as heck. Well, how beautiful the country is doesn't normally make them friendly or not. I don't know about Georgia. I've never really heard. But the food is so good. Does it matter how friendly they are? Have you had that cheesy egg bread thing. You're not going to care about the people. You're just going to eat that. A lady was shot and killed last night in Matagalpa. Oh, wow. There was also a Nicaraguan was brutally murdered and buried in a pit a couple nights ago in Costa Rica. I know there's a cross-national manhunt underway, but that sucks. I hadn't heard about Matagalpa yet. Or if I did, I didn't realize that's what the story was. Expat, I'm trying not to be too chatty. I have a bit of a hangnail that's bothering me. All right, guys, it is getting pretty slow. And Ether's got, yep, see, it picks up because I said that. I'm out of tokens. I got the $200 a month one, and you ran out of tokens. Oh my gosh. How much can you tell are the token, how much more tokens do you get with that than you get with the $20 one? Is it 10 times more? Is it just double? Like, I mean, you get a lot for the $20. So what I do is I actually have multiple plans from different places. And I find that, so I've got 3 plans. I've got the Junie plan, I've got the Windsurf plan, and I've got the Codex plan. And having those 3, every time I add, like if I add on to Windsurf, the rate at which I'm adding on is tiny compared to the base rate. And so far I found having multiple services and using them for different things gets me a lot more mileage than just having more on one. Expat says, I'm not moving to Nicaragua. I have sent a bunch of stuff that never got responded to, just not see it. Oh, are you sure that it came up? Sometimes they just don't come up. Don Huego says, I asked Claude why it is not available in Nicaragua. It, without claiming authoritative answers, says it's likely because of U.S. sanctions, which is fake. Says most all U.S. sanctioned countries are restricted. There are no sanctions against Nicaragua. We know that they are all going to say that. It's because there's so much source material, right? But since it's an unsanctioned country, it is 100% just because Claude sanctioned it themselves. And if you look at the list of the places that it does support, it suggests the matter is subject to review. Yeah, right. You try to use it, it just says no. There's no review. X says, I got a better deal back home. Well, that's too bad. But I do want to fit it. Oh, Lending Looks is Bryce. Oh. How competent are Costa Rican and Nicaragua's police investigators units? Well, Nicaragua so far has been good. They don't tend to get really tough things, I don't think. Costa Rica, I have no idea. I assume they're fine, right? I'm not in any way disparaging them. Just, I have no idea. Yes, you can save money doing the $20 a month Codex plans. However, it's a pain in the butt. Mine has not been. I did run out of some credits, like at times, but it's like barely running out of credits. And then I bought some extra just so I would have them, so just to give me some flexibility. But I find that it's actually hard for me to hit the $20 limits most of the time. So, I wish they had a plan that was like 25% more, maybe 50% more. I love how good of a job it does. I would use it maybe some more, but it's just paying any significant amount more would be nonsensical. But because I have it now, if I didn't have windsurf, which is my main tool, right? So that's worth pointing out. I pay $15 a month for windsurf and get so much out of that that I always was like, should I even keep Codex at all? But now I've got Codex doing a bunch of stuff. I run them in parallel, right? So I have a computer running one and a computer running the other. So I'm using credits at double speed in many cases, and I still rarely need to go over the base plans in either, even though I 7 days a week all day long. It's amazing how much you get. The people who are paying for more than that are using a lot to consistently be going over that. On the other way, is there additional tax fee for it being a high-valued electronics device, say for a TV monitor, computer, and equipment? No, not at all. Well, I mean, it depends. Depends on what you do, but under normal circumstances, most of us who are buying stuff like that use a freight forwarder that is weight-based, and so there is no fee. If you did something really weird, right, like specialty communications equipment, that could flag for extra fees, but normal stuff like a laptop, a desktop, a video game machine, a TV, no, they're weight-based. Obviously, even a small gaming rig is going to weigh more than just a cheap little computer. So you're paying an extra several dollars for the weight or whatever. That can happen, and it is common. But no. I mean, if you think about it, like if someone orders a TV, they weigh a lot, so you're paying extra just because of that. Lending says, if the U.S. economy collapsed and the dollar no longer was even as powerful as Europe, where would we go, and which country would accept a lot of us immigrants? Well, migrants, I guess at that point. I mean, stop making your money in the U.S., I guess, at that point. Oh, Expat is coming, but just short term. But once you're here, you might not leave, as is often the case. For some of us, if the U.S. economy collapses, options are depending what you have, but moving your business to Europe, moving your business to Asia, moving your business to Latin America, moving it all depends on what the world looks like at that point, right? So you have to figure it out as you go. I've only ran on my daily limit. It resets, and then you have a weekly limit. I have it running a lot, though, doing research and learning skills. Bought a MacBook Air with 32 gigs of RAM for another setup. Yeah, I'm just about to get another. So I've got this Mac that I'm touching that we're working on right now. And then I have a MacBook Air as well, which I really like. But I'm just about to get a replacement Mac desktop because I need a lot more power. Then I have another laptop sitting here, and then another... Where'd it go? I have another desktop sitting here somewhere. Wow, I lost it. I actually lost the desktop. It's somewhere in this room. So I've got like 5 machines. I don't have any with 32 gigs. I'm going to get that in the next one. But I've got like 5 16 gig machines sitting here. So I can do a bunch of things at once. But I do split it up. So you tend to run out of your daily limits. I tend to run out of my weekly limits. That's what hits me. My dailies are not normally too bad, but it's because I work 7 days a week. But I'm actually doing work, not research, because, it's terrible at research. Like, that's specifically what it's bad at. So, I don't use it for that stuff. I finally got a tariff of $55 for shipping in my iPhone, and I'm confused because I never got tariff before. Maybe they didn't catch it last time. That's possible. Did you ship only the iPhone, or was it with things? Where did you ship? What shipping did you use? Everything used to show up and pick up at customs, and they'd tax you on anything that looked high value. So if you're using a freight forwarder, you often don't have that happen. That's not how it works anymore, or ever. I don't know. I think there's a big misconception from back in the day, or maybe how things worked before these shipping companies now offer those weight-based services. Now, yes. I repeated you without knowing that's what you said. Yeah, we don't have any of that I've seen. Now, I haven't shipped in an iPhone, right? Maybe that was... Yeah, so far using the weight-based shippers, I've had absolutely nothing be weird. Um, yeah, the Mac Minis are really nice. They're about to have the right now they're the M4 and the M4 Max with 32 gig. They're about to have, or no, I think they go up to 64 gig now. They're about to have the M5s. I don't know what they'll go up. Um, about to go up in what they're offering. June, I think. Well, I have it managing Gemini for research. You have GPT managing Gemini for research? Isn't Gemini the absolute worst? Like, Gemini is so bad, it makes me not want to use any Google services because I don't trust anything they make anymore due to just how bad Gemini is. Like, that Google thought releasing Gemini to the public was a good move makes me question every single layer of Google competence. Which actually makes sense. As you look at their products, every one of them has either completely stagnated or died. And it's like Google makes nothing of interest anymore. I mean, we're saying this on YouTube, right? YouTube seems seems good, but like all of their products, all their software, like just rough. I'm not saying it's the worst, just but Gemini is bad. Like Google search is useless. Lending says Pinolero. Last time I shipped 5 iPhones and no tariff. Expat says Scott, I'll just be a snowbird for the time being. Cool. It's a good place to snowbird. Except for the short-term rental thing makes it a little bit tough. But if you're snowbirding and you know you're coming back, you do the storage and furniture thing, and then it's not too bad. And it can be really good, in fact. Especially for Apple devices, usually you'd want those reboxed. Clearly, some of the shipping services are more lenient. Oh, picking back off of Lending Looks comments. I think when packages show up on their original manufacturer boxes, it may trigger a red flag on some of those shipping services. I agree. I would always want those to be reboxed. Um, Lending says, how do they even know what is in my box? They didn't open it. A scanner? I mean, most places have scanners. Um, it depends where the box is from, I suppose. But lots of countries use scanners on boxes coming in. If you think about like at the airport, they're scanning you at the airport, so they're used to doing that, right? Are they bringing it through somewhere else? No, they're bringing it through the same ports with the same scanners. So Gemini is great at research. Have you ever looked at the output from Gemini? Wow. Don't take this the wrong way, Bryce, but famously, you post things that your AI research said that should be obvious are gibberish. Um, Gemini is the poster child for not being able to do a basic web search. Like, all AI is bad at research. Like, that's specifically what it's bad at. It doesn't understand context, so it's a really bad tool for that. Like, use AI for what it's good at, not what it's bad at. But Gemini especially is famous for being the example everybody uses for why AI is incompetent. Um, Google Pixel's the best phone ever made. Huh. Richard Johansson, scanner or many places have to send a declaration paper when they mail things to other countries so customers can see that. With all the places I know, I don't know about Pinolero, but with all the ones I know, they don't know what they're shipping. It's blind to the shipper. So if they're tariffing in Nicaragua, then they have to be doing something to find it once they've gotten here. Samantha says, do you think it's safer to be in a country aligned with China and other global ties than one reliant on the USA? Oh, absolutely. Right? I mean, so let me preface this. I don't think being in a country aligned with the USA is particularly dangerous on its own. The individual country and what it's doing is playing a much bigger factor. But if you want to take the abstract and say, are the group of countries aligned with safe, good countries safer than those aligned with reckless, dangerous, fascist countries? Yeah, I think so. Right? Like, being on the right side of history typically is going to be a lot safer. All of America's allies are incredibly dangerous countries. But, if you go to an American allied country in Africa or in Southeast Asia and say, is this super dangerous because it's aligned with the U.S.? No, it is not. Is it more dangerous than it would be if it wasn't aligned with the U.S.? Yeah, probably. But by what, 1% or something? Right. The real problem is places that are actively doing something really dangerous. Often those are ones that are aligned with the U.S., so they come with a lot of danger. But in the future, we will see countries encouraging more Americans to immigrate and stay. Will we see countries encouraging more Americans to immigrate and stay? I don't think so. No, I think that the peak of that has passed. Right. I'm not saying the places are going to be like no Americans. Some places are already saying that. Right. You're starting to see Americans be turned away, but is it going to be large numbers? Probably not. Is it illegal to dupe customs? Absolutely. Should I even mention my frustration as I was never tariffed prior? You should not mention it, right? Because all you would be doing is saying, I'm frustrated you didn't tax me previously, right? So there's a bunch of possibilities. One, the process has changed. Two, the tariff has changed. Three, they didn't catch you the first time, right? We know that there's a tariff on goods coming from the United States. So complaining that you didn't pay it in the past might go nowhere, right? Because maybe there wasn't a tariff in the past. Maybe this is a new tariff, right? Because they change all the time. So it might be just, this is silly. Or you may be simply complaining and pointing out that someone didn't charge you when they should. That's kind of like, so imagine this scenario. I get stopped by the police for speeding. And I'm really speeding. I don't mean I'm being I mean, I'm speeding. They pull me over. Like, you were doing 80 and a 50? Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, don't let it happen again. And that happens 4 times. And then the 5th time, the cop's like, I'm sorry, I'm writing you up a ticket. And I go, what? The last 4 guys didn't give me a ticket. Who do you think you are giving me a ticket? I think we all know how that conversation would go, right? Instead of being really thankful that other people didn't do what they could have done to you, complaining that they didn't is always going to, at best, get you an unhappy guy, and at worst, go really badly. He says, I had Gemini research a lot of legal cases for me. I had no complaints. Maybe that was easy for it. If it has access to them. So here's the question, though. If you have it do research, how do you know it's giving you real answers? Because it's famous for faking answers. And they're all going to fake answers, but it's famous for how badly it does. Expat says, more Americans are leaving the USA than are entering. Why? Is that true? I mean, the obvious reason is why would anybody still be there? We're past the point of safely being able to get out, right? We're now if you're not making the conscious decision, we're at the point where everyone is either unable to make the decision to leave or has made the decision to stay, right? I think that is a safe statement to make if I said it correctly, right? There's plenty of people who don't have the option. They don't have a way to leave. Poor, don't have a passport, can't get one, criminals, incarcerated, children, whatever. But of people who are physically and financially capable of getting out of the country, there is no longer any plausible person. There's no plausible deniability that people know what's going on, what their risks are, and that if they want to be insulated from that, that they have to have gotten out. There isn't anyone who can make the claim that they aren't actually aware that the risk of being trapped is now within the realm of current, right? At this point, you could lose your freedom to leave the country. You have it today, but it may not be there by the time you get to the airport, right? And it doesn't require closing the borders. It can be closing the airports. It can be reducing staff. It can be putting ICE instead of TSA. There's a lot of different mechanisms that can be used that may stop you or may stop everyone from exiting the country. And like I said on the channel, we already know of people who have waited too long and become trapped in active war zones because they believed the rhetoric that it wasn't too late, that there was guaranteed time, or nothing's ever guaranteed, but there is the assumption of safety for the upcoming. And this is going back to the early 2 hours ago discussion of Nicaragua expat life. One of his arguments was the United States is safe and there isn't imminent danger, which he knows is a lie and is harmful. He is putting people at risk for a personal agenda he's trying to push. I'm not saying that people need to all get out. I'm saying that people have made the decision about whether they are going to use getting out to protect them or not. At this point, they are past the point of having made that decision. They may change that decision in the future. You may be there now and go, you know what? I thought I was going to ride it out here. Now I've decided I want to ride it out somewhere else. That's fine. Changing that. But the decision to stay past the point of imminent danger has passed by some time. And so you must be seeing people leave in great numbers, but I am shocked if it's true that people are actually leaving in greater numbers than are going in, other than it's very difficult to get in, because we do not see this mass migration out. We have seen an increase over a number of years, over a decade. We saw an increase, a lot of people got out, but it's just gone back to normal numbers. Oh. I currently have an iPhone again, though, because I can speak Spanish now. Awesome. It's too expensive. Wait, I currently have an iPhone again, though, because I can speak Spanish now. It's too expensive. Nica Flow. There are so many services. I would just recommend using another if that one has now flagged you that you bring over. The freight forwarders bring over items that can be easily charged a tariff for importing items. 2025 says, yes, it is true. For the immigration. Interesting. You have a point. Healthcare alone is too expensive, widely reported in the news. Everyone's already known that one, though. Like, that's... Nobody since quite some time ago thought healthcare wasn't too expensive. People would lie about it, but they were really resulted in lying about it. It cites all sources and case links. Well, yeah, I mean, those things are easy if they're really citing sources, but then you're just doing Google searches, right? In a very expensive way. Fortunately, if you're a felon, you can still get a passport in many cases. Imagine how nice it would have been touring Europe during COVID with empty streets, except it was all locked down, so you couldn't. I personally am in a position to work remotely. The company I work for, though, they don't advertise employing overseas. Other Americans, they certainly don't stop you if your state of employment is within the U.S. I personally am in a position to work remote. Yeah, just be remote and make your state not the U.S. The thing that a lot of us do, Nica Flow, and this is probably obvious, but we make sure that our state of residence is a non-tax state. Texas, New Hampshire, Tennessee, Florida, and so forth. There's plenty. And then maintain residency. Right, so I don't need it for any purpose, but I have maintained Texas residency. If you wanted to pay me as a U.S. employee, you can pay me in Texas. I file as if I'm in Texas. I am legally in Texas. I have not, right? I meet every qualification to be a Texan. I am a Texan, right? I have a driver's license. I have an address. I have bank accounts. I am a Texan. I lived in Texas for a long time. There's not any. I'm not skirting anything. I'm not loopholing anything. I'm a full-on Texan, but I made that decision long before leaving the country, mostly a decade. And so my state of employment, the company I work for obviously doesn't care what country I'm in. It does. It cares that I'm not inside the U.S. for tax reasons, but it files me as a Texan resident, right? It just makes everything easier. If you're stated, he's remote leverage that gives you jobs left and right, $9 to $12 an hour. Use respectfully, if there are plenty of folks like me who have a career that keeps us here, I must be close to clients here in Texas. Well, that's right. So it's I'm not saying that it's a decision that you shouldn't have made, right? But it's a decision you have made, right? And that's all there is, right? So it's you have the option to change careers, for example, but you're weighing it, presumably, right? You must be. Well, my career is worth this much, and the protections, I think, of getting out are this much, right? Or whatever, I guess, whatever way I'm trying to show it. And so you say, yeah, I could protect myself to some degree, but what's the real risk, right? It's not like the U.S. is going to nuke itself and eliminate all people and just that's not going to happen. So that's not the risk. So what is the risk, right? You have to figure out what that is, and maybe the risk is that the border's closed. Absolutely, you may be trapped in the U.S. That's a real thing, right? And you weigh that against not having a career or not having the same career and having to start a completely new career. If you're leaving the U.S., you might have, right? If the U.S. collapses, you may have to get a career outside the U.S., right? If that's what you're doing. So it's not that a choice hasn't been made. It's that there are, everyone has to weigh factors for them, right? My career allowed me to move pretty easily, but I shifted out of a career on Wall Street. I used to be a Wall Street consultant, right? And while that gave me a lot of flexibility and allowed me to work in a lot of places, it did require that I fly into Manhattan on a regular basis or live there. And that is something I gave up to be able to live outside the United States full time, right? So it's part of the decision tree. Absolutely, no one should be taking the decision has been made as the decision is wrong, right? The decision to stay needs to be made by, let's say, 325 million people, right? 5 million might be able to leave. 10 million might be able to leave, but in a country of, and I'm assuming the population is about 335 million, maybe it's grown. At 335 million, the country can only bear so many millions leaving. If more leave, bad things start to happen. Not that it would completely collapse, but it would have a negative ripple effect. If only a small number leave, but in a country the size of the U.S., that's millions of people, nobody notices. But there are positive effects by having, from a U.S. perspective, of having its people abroad. And so the U.S. remains in a position where it is heavily, not casually, heavily attempting to encourage financially its own citizens to leave the country. It doesn't want 100 million people to leave. It doesn't want 20 million to leave, but it might want 2 million to leave, right? And so those are all things that just have to be balanced into individual people's decisions, right? If you're a plumber, if you're an on-premise consultant, you're going to be encouraged very heavily to weigh your career as a reason to stay. It's in the pro column or the con column, however you look at it. But if you have a job that has no benefit to being in the country, then it's going to flip the other way. Well, if I leave, the government's going to kind of pay me to leave, and the tax advantages of being somewhere else kind of pays me to leave, and the cost of living somewhere else is going to pay me to leave. Correct. I'm in Texas. I used to live in Miami, but that lifestyle in my mid 20s is no good for my mental and physical health. Don Huego says, when I retire, I have Nicaragua as a possible place to move to. I made career decisions 35 years ago. I don't have the option to leave this year, hopefully soon. Lending says, I'm employed out of Texas and pay no taxes. I have a 1099 EC or whatever contractor tax form so I can write everything off. Those can be complicated in some cases. He's right. You can, in some cases, do that. I would recommend, under normal circumstances, for most people watching this, if you're going to do what Lending Looks is doing, consider incorporating in Texas instead, and then paying yourself as a normal salary may make things a lot easier. I think if you're employed and don't have the contractor but normal employment tax form, it's only $15,000 you can write off federally. That's incorrect. The normal salary, that you can write off, that may be, but if you don't have the 1099 EC and do have a W-2, as it's called, right? For those who are not Americans, this is a really weird Americanism. We refer to all of our statuses by their federal form numbers. So 1099 Lending, are you sure it's a 1099 EC and not a 1099 EZ? But maybe it's the EC. But if you're W-2 like me, the automatic write-off is $130,000. So Samantha says, so true. The difference in healthcare alone makes leaving worth it. Widely reported in the news. Yeah, the healthcare alone is huge. But it is true that with a W-2, you can't really write off business expenses. But on a 1099, that's much harder. If you're doing a LLC, then the numbers are unlimited. You have so much flexibility. Not in every case does that make sense. There are cases for the 1099, but most of the time an LLC is going to give you, or something else, some other form of incorporation. But real incorporation can potentially give you so much protection, flexibility, isolation, and tax manipulation capability. It's how once you're moving, like part of the reason that 1099s are so restricted is because there's this other mechanism that gives you those options. And then the 1099 or the W-2 relationship is a decision between you and that entity, not between that entity and the person who's paying you. So it gives you that extra isolation where you have more power over that paperwork and don't have to engage outside parties. So that's relatively significant, right? I think a lot of people don't understand how much flexibility and power owning your own company will do. Makes sense regarding nuance between countries actively aligned versus passively aligned. For sure. At this point, right, so the alignment is the underpinning of the terms first world, second world, third world. Originally, first world referred to the places aligned with the U.S., second world, those places aligned with Russia, and third world was the unaligned countries. The first and second world managed to make the GDPs of their associated countries generally very high, leaving the third world appearing very poor because the third world didn't use that measurement, so no one cared. In many cases, they were actually poor, but in many cases, they actually weren't. So it's all over the place. That's the sound of a jet going over. Boy, you don't hear that very often. Obviously, jets do go over regularly because they fly into Managua, but I don't normally hear their engines like that. That's crazy. And so in the modern world, these things don't really make sense because we, over time, stopped associating them with spheres of alignment and started associating, we sort of just lost the second world. We started assuming unaligned countries were poor. The first world was assumed to be rich because the U.S. ran it. But the developed countries, as we called the first world, now in many cases are struggling to compete with the undeveloped countries. And if you step back and think about what developed means, suddenly the developed countries look pretty undeveloped compared to the others in a lot of cases. And so the whole mechanism starts to get weird. Don Huego says, I'm just struggling to see how leaving is an option for everyone. Certainly would not be rational for me just being a few years short of retirement. So it all comes down to, so first of all, it is an option for everyone. It just is, with the rarest exception, right? If we're talking people in abject poverty, right? When, for example, and again, I'm not saying you're wrong, but can you really say that leaving the country is not an option for you? It's, I understand why it sucks to be in a position where the timing says this would be a great time to leave, and your finances say, but you'll be penalized heavily for doing so. Well, for sure, right? My sister-in-law is in a similar boat. She's a teacher. She's very close to retirement. She was about to be able to retire. This is maybe 3 years ago, and right before she retired, they gave her a golden handcuff that gave her a massive boost on her salary if she completed 5 more years. And if she doesn't complete the 5 more years, she basically gets nothing for the time. But if she does complete it, she gets a ton. Can she leave? Yes, she has every bit of power to leave the United States that she did have 3 years ago. She's not in a worse position in any way. In fact, she's just slightly better, but just slightly. But if she waits 2 more years, or maybe a year and a half more, it's getting pretty close, then she will have this windfall that will make it so good, and she won't likely get another golden handcuff past that point. So, is she in any way unable to leave? No, she is in no way restricted from leaving, but it's so financially advantageous to not leave that it feels like she can't. And I understand why she makes the decision not to, right? But you, I guarantee, are in a position where if you decided to leave today, you absolutely could, right? And I don't care what your career is, right? You have the ability, almost certainly, 99% certain, you have the physical ability to leave the country and move abroad. If you think about migrants who are moving from country to country for safety or for their families, they have, chances are, so much less than you do. Less right now to pack up in their bag and go, and less to leverage when they get there, right? And if you think about those people coming to the U.S. with so little, they have the ability to do it with almost nothing. Most of us moving out of the U.S. are at least doing so with, as long as you are an American citizen with access to work in the U.S. market and speak English, you have more than 99% of the world's migrants, right? Again, I'm not saying that that means you should leave. I'm just saying that you have more ability than nearly any expat in the world to move abroad, live abroad, stay abroad, and earn money. Now, will you earn anywhere near as much as you would if you didn't leave? No, I don't think so, based on what you're saying. Like, I don't know what you do, so I'm guessing. But would you give up massive amounts of money to do so? Probably. Would it be a smart thing for you to do? No, probably not. Right? So you're probably making the right decision, but it's important to understand it is a decision. There's really no chance that you're actually trapped. It just feels that way because the windfall you're potentially getting is so large, right? And tons of people feel that way, and tons of people, like my sister-in-law, it would be crazy to give that up. Because the chances that something's going to go so wrong and stay so wrong long enough that will affect her is only so much. But the chances that that payout is going to make her long-term retirement so much better is really high, right? And that sounds like the boat you're in, right? If you just wait a little bit longer, you're going to have this pension or retirement savings or something that's going to trigger a tipping point where, okay, now staying and working extra doesn't really benefit you very much. Most people experience this at some point. Whereas, but if you think about it, right, my kids are able to leave the country, right? And so my daughter's just about to turn 18. She can move out of the United States. No job history, no nothing, right? She doesn't need any real resources to get out of the country. Now that she's out of the country, her ability to support herself and do stuff is really just as good or better than if she was in the country, right? Because cost of living is lower, taxes are lower, all these advantages, but she retains that she's an American citizen and is able to work remotely in the U.S. market. She's able to open businesses in the United States. She's also, because she's been here, able to work in Nicaragua. She's able to do things like that. And so it feels like, and people want you to think that they don't have an option to leave. They want it to be perceived as, I don't have that choice, because then they don't have to explain that choice. But I've never actually met an American who didn't have that choice. Right? I've met homeless Americans who certainly had the financial capability to move out of the United States. Did they have great capability to be somewhere else? No, but they were also homeless in the U.S., right? But their ability, if they decided to do any amount of effort, because of their tax advantages and the weather advantages and the right to work, if they cared to work, if they wanted to move out of the United States, they absolutely could. They don't want to, so they're not going to, right? But that just because they decided they didn't want to is not the same as not being able to. I'm not saying that there aren't severely handicapped or ill or whatever, right? And obviously there are some people like my father who can't move out of the United States because he has a medical condition that makes it he can't physically get here, right? That's I can't move out, right? My nieces and nephews, they don't have the legal ability to leave the country because they're children on their own. So those are examples of can't move out, right? Absolutely. But if you're an adult and able-bodied, there's a big difference between it doesn't make sense to move versus can't. Lending says 1099 NEC just saw my ADP. Okay. Samantha says, I get that, Don Juego. It sucks to be in that position so close to retirement. Nika Flo says, the only cons on my list are that my Evo will now be a Garage Queen HA. Selling it has not crossed my mind, and life has not given me that ultimatum to do so. In one of your vids, you mentioned folks driving Jeeps are constantly pulled over, which sucks since I really always wanted one and never got the chance to purchase one in the U.S. Yeah, that's... Jeeps especially get a lot of negative attention here. Not negative like they look at you badly, just negative like the attention affects your life in a negative way. Lending says, if I'm making $3K and I want to allocate $1,000 into savings but would rather put it into something high yielding, where would you put the $1K? AMP 500, gold, definitely not gold. Gold's performance history is one of the worst of all things ever. High yield is always a little bit tough. So if you actually want the highest yield, generally that's running your own business, right? That's just how it is. I always put my stuff into myself, right? Because I want to leverage it. Not because I think it's going to make the most money. It just doesn't. But because I want the lifestyle that self-investment brings. I have found that for me, that's the biggest benefit. That would not be for most people, I don't think. Definitely not for everyone, I don't think for most people. But you want to stay away from anything that everyone is talking about. Those are always going to be the worst things, right? So gold is garbage now, right? Heavily inflated. Stay away from, right now in the short term, U.S. stock market, outrageously inflated. Crypto may or may not be inflated, but like gold, crypto and gold don't earn money. You don't have an investment. And you actually said, oh no, maybe you didn't. But they're non-investments, right? They're trading mechanisms. You're working on arbitrage alone. There's no earnings. By far the best stuff is going to be small players, and at this point probably outside the U.S. Certainly some things in the U.S. are going to do really well, but you're getting into niche players right now. The overall market is highly volatile and looking at a bubble pop, so you've got a lot of risk if going into those things. Yeah, sometimes there's still high yield, but the risk is at a lifetime extreme. Life is for experiences, especially when young. World War II Germany may be a better metaphor. Not sure what the first metaphor was that it's replacing. Nika Flo says, not financial advice, but in the last 3 years contributed about 1.5 every month to S&P 500 ETF Trust. Its total yield, return 150, take that as you will. S&P 500s are fantastic. Index funds, especially like Vanguard Admiralty, have just unbelievably good return rates historically. Right now, if you were like holding that, yeah, hold that. But if you are looking to invest today, those things are very risky because you're looking at a bubble pop and you could be going in and looking at quite low yield for a long time. $1.25 a day, not every month. That makes more sense. And I assumed you meant 150. You actually meant $1.50. Um, um, so yeah, so right now is a very volatile time to be investing. That doesn't mean that it's a wrong thing to do. Again, it's just you're taking a lot more risk, and traditional knowledge is difficult, right? So traditional experience says an index fund, when you're holding for a long time, always recovers, always has, likely always will. Even going through a collapse of the country, it may survive reasonably. Is it going to do as well as if it didn't collapse? No, not very likely. But will it recover and probably do okay in the long haul? Yeah, probably. 1000%. I tried a bit at playing a Wall Street guy's side gig, but it just wasn't for me. Uncle Sam wanting his percent for every positive return is insane. I'm holding till I retire. Yeah, that's trading comes with a lot of penalties, but trading is where you can make faster money, right? You can make that 1% this morning, make it again at lunch, make it again this afternoon, even if they're taking a cut. Lending says maybe safest yielding. I do well with Bitcoin. Right, Bitcoin, again, pure trading. The only way to make money is to move it really fast because it's not going anywhere, right? It's way down. You can have held for the last 5 years and not made a penny pretty much. Whereas if you had an S&P 500 and it held steady for 5 years, which it doesn't, it's always going up. But if an S&P 500 held steady for 5 years, it would have gained money through its dividends. That's where people in Bitcoin don't generally understand that they're looking at a trading only mechanism. Whereas when we talk about investing, the thing we're holding is making money and there's trading, right? The trading is the icing on top. It's not the cake. But with Bitcoin or gold, there's no cake. There's only the icing. And if the icing doesn't come through, you're screwed. Just like people who bought gold in 1980, 1979, had it worth nothing, if they lost money for 48 years or something, no, 46 years, and then right now in a massive bubble for 1 year, it's worth more than what they bought it for. But they've held it for all that time. And if you compare against a minimum yield index fund during that time, the difference is so unbelievable. Here, I'm going to run the math just to see if I can find the chart, because it really is interesting to look at gold. If anyone ever tells you that gold is a good idea, you got to say, well, what about these numbers? And they will always, anyone who wants to sell you gold will never apply inflation. $1971. That's why. Okay. Where is the... Oh, of course there's no chart. And it's loading. Okay. So if you bought gold in 1980, okay? 1980, where's my... 630, no, 680. There we go. Wait, no, there it is. So $680.50. Okay. That is worth roughly $2,746 today. Okay, so now let's look at the chart. If you'd have bought gold in 1980 and held it until October of 2024, that's just a year and a half ago, you would have broken even on inflation. Broken even. Okay? And then today it's worth about 4,724. So someone trying to trick you on gold will be like, if you only spent 600, you'll be at 4,700, right? They'll leave off the 80, whatever. And that sounds good. You say, well, even with inflation, that's not double. That's like 80% more. Okay, sure. But one, that's a bubble. You have to have held for a lifetime. That's 46 years that you needed to, well, you could have sold it at 45 years and done quite well, right? 45 years. That is a long time during which gold did not increase to slowly get up to almost double during that time. It went down. And for 44 years, your gold was worth almost nothing. And then it shot up right now, but it's collapsing again. So if you hadn't gotten out, you'd now be in a panic. I don't know if it's ever going to go up again. And so that's really scary. Had you... So the final number is 47,000. Had you done the same thing, put in hold on, let me make sure that this is correct. Can that be correct? If you had put the same money into the S&P index fund in 1980, so one put it into gold and has $4,700 today. The other put it into the S&P index. Today it would be worth $118,860. And that's considered a baseline, right? That's the no effort. And it's safer. If you'd invested in gold, there's this risk that something would have happened to your gold during that time. There's also a risk that something would happen to your S&P investment, but in general, it's not that big of a deal. So the one is riskier and had a bubble. So only right in this particular moment, for the first time in 45 years, can we talk about there being a profit, and it could be gone tomorrow. The S&P increased that entire time. So at any moment, you could have pulled your money out and been ahead. There was a month here or there where that you might have lost a bit of ground, but there was never a time where you ever got back to the original. You never had more than a 24-hour period that you were not above where you started, unlike the gold that was below where you started the whole way. So when you consider the baseline versus the gold in its best performance ever, holding for 4.5 decades, is a loser of such epic proportions. It may be, short of just setting money on fire or just holding cash in a mattress, the absolute worst investment known to man. Indigenous says, if anyone thinks they can predict the New York Stock Exchange right now is foolish. The past does not matter. New times. That's somewhat true, but we're talking hundreds of years of prediction. And even with the collapsing, are we potentially looking at a new world order? Yes, maybe. But we've been through things like this of global collapses before, and holding real stocks with real dividends has always proven to be the performer. That new beer Nicaragua makes is better than Tonya. It's a Boreal. I like it. I don't think it's better than Tonya. Glad to see you live tonight, Scott. How is the Caribbean side? Bluefields, have you been? I've not been. Everyone always asks that. I never know what the draw is. Like, Lending Looks has been out there. He really likes it. I work in Belize, and the Belizeans often go back and forth between there and Bluefields, and um, um, and they're just like, yeah, Bluefields is better than Belize, but it's so similar. And when I'm in Belize, I'm not like, oh, I'm so thankful I'm in Belize. Like, it's fine. I'm not like complaining about it, but I certainly wouldn't make an effort to go out there. I want to go out and I want to film the Caribbean coast. I want to see it. Obviously, I'm not trying to skip it, but the degree to which it's not particularly interesting is pretty high, because I work on the Caribbean coast, and it's, you know, in this area, the Pacific coast is just so much nicer in general. What was the name? Lending. Small fun fact: if you ever purchase an antique gold jewelry dated back to the 80s, early 90s, if it doesn't have the 14KP stamp and only 14K, the 14K may mean it's not true 14K. But the P in 14KP means it's exactly 14K. Father gave me his ring with that stamp, and I went through hella research on it. Interesting. I've not heard that. Bet on the collapse. How is Belize for expats? Oh, the worst. Extremely expensive, extremely dangerous, very little to offer. I'm not saying it's all bad. I'm not like down on Belize, right? But tiny country. It's physically ridiculously small, so there's very, very physically little. It's outrageously more expensive than Nicaragua, with just less, right? So if you like Belize, Nicaragua basically has more Belize to offer you than Belize does, of basically the same thing, and without the danger, right? And without the unbelievable, like, expats, the banking situation in Belize is the worst in. I've never heard of a place so bad for dealing with money. I would never invest in Belize. I would never buy in Belize. I would never, ever, 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 like, visit, hang out, stay at a hotel. Absolutely, have a good time, right? Is it my vibe? Not really. I watch Death in Paradise all the time, and so it gets me into like it gets me into the Caribbean vibe. Like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to be in Guadeloupe? Wouldn't it be cool to be in Dominica? Wouldn't it be cool to be in Martinique? Yes. And Belize gives me just a tiny bit of that vibe. But in general, when I'm in Belize, I don't have that vibe, right? Not enough of it to really do it. There's bits where I'm like, okay, and I'm supposed to be there in just a few weeks, and I'll enjoy it and all that. But, especially for expats, I can't think of a worse place to go, right? Like, it's so bad. Custody orders as well, Samantha says. Lending says, if you file bankruptcy, do you have to declare your stock portfolio? Pretty sure. Otherwise, you would just put everything into stocks and be like, haha. Indigenous says, gotcha. All right. Got me on Belize. Yeah, it's just, so for those who don't know, once your money goes into Belize, basically if you're in Belize, you have to transfer your money into Belizean dollars, and you can't take them with you when you go. So everything you do is a one-way trip. And things like that we take for granted in Nicaragua, like buying products from the U.S., using credit cards, moving money around, things that, I mean, I travel all over: Mexico, Guatemala, Argentina, Bolivia, Europe, Canada, all these places. You can do all these things. You think nothing about it. You go to Belize, nothing that you think will just functions. Everything becomes this huge problem, and suddenly, you're in a country that is so small, and you have so few freedoms and flexibilities that just, I would not make a life there. And anyone who does, I don't trust their judgment, right? All those people making videos about Belize, I'm like, do they not understand how the banking works? Do they not understand cost? Do they not understand safety? Do they just not prioritize those things? Which is fine, right? I mean, but why would I go to a place that's super expensive to live and super dangerous and really restrictive and has nothing particularly to offer, and then buy a house for $1 million, right? When I could get that same house for 50,000 in Nicaragua and not have all those problems, right? Like that's crazy. Um, so it's very weird for me in that way. Like it's a cool, it's a different country, so I'm always down for that, and I don't go on my own dime when I'm there. So yep, that's all cool, right? I don't pay for my hotel rooms, I don't pay for my flights, but it was never a place we would consider going because it's English speaking. It's a colony, like it's an active colony, right? It's part of the Commonwealth. They have the king. They're not a fully sovereign country. They have all the problems that come with being in the Commonwealth. All those things we would, they don't have rule of law, same as the U.S. and Canada. Like hell no, right? But for visiting, right, it's fine. But yeah, if you see expats promoting it, um, maybe they're like the Costa Ricans who quite often are like, this is the best because it's the one place they went. I have a friend whose parents swore by Costa Rica. I'm like, what? Nothing you're saying makes sense. And then they went to one other country and we're like, oh my gosh, this place is so much better than Costa Rica. And I'm like, how little are you listening? You obviously went to one town outside the US, realized the world outside the US was so much better, and lost your minds and never considered the possibility that you needed to explore more than one village. Like they thought they discovered the one place in the world that was cool. And I think Belize has the same thing. It gets these people who are afraid of Spanish speaking but want warm weather. They're told it's cheap, even though it isn't. They show up. It might be cheaper than the US. I don't think it is. Um, and they're like, this is amazing because it's the one thing they saw. And so they promote it, and it's like, but have you compared it to anything? And they're like, what else is there? Right? That's the. Plus, Belize is completely disputed territory. There's no part of Belize that isn't in dispute. So while I don't think that's a huge deal, one of the reasons it remains a British colony and under the crown, under King Charles as a possession, is because they're scared to be independent. If they were an independent sovereign country, Guatemala easily would take them in a matter of hours. At this point, they mostly have friendly relationships with Guatemala, but they are claimed by Guatemala. They are claimed as a European colony on Guatemalan territory, which means if you're a colonial expat and you're in that country, buying land may not be honored in the future, right? Because it's public knowledge. If you look on Google Maps, Belize does not have hard borders because it doesn't have legal borders. So saying that your land is truly yours might be difficult in the future when Guatemala says the people who sold it to you were colonials that are illegal. Right? So you're on stolen land that you knew was stolen because everyone buying in Belize knows that it's claimed territory. So all things that make it just the risk level is so high in Belize just across the board that it's really hard to imagine what has gone through the minds of any expat that goes there. My friends who are there, my business partners who are there, they're born in Belize, right? They've been there for generations, and so it's different. That's their country. So of course, you try to, do the best thing for your country, and it does have good stuff. Like if you want to be a tourist in Belize, definitely go enjoy it. It'll be cool. But yeah, being an expat, yeah. Samantha just bought flights for May 10th. Awesome. Praying we make it on time. So nervous. Mexican Righteous. Looks nice. I've been looking at Nicaragua for a few months, and I just started watching vlogs on the Caribbean side. It looks beautiful. There's a lot of islands on that side. I wouldn't say there's a lot of islands, but there are islands. I think a lot might be pushing it. There are a few. Why does Belize exist? Belize exists because the British, as always, seized part of Guatemalan territory and held it militarily and tried to move people from other colonies to have a port, which kind of works and kind of doesn't. In Digital says, Panama, love Panama. I think it's fantastic. It's got a lot of potential. We definitely, yeah, Nica Flow, they got dotted lines on their border on Google Maps. Yes, exactly. It's just a dotted line. Be wary. That's a moving target. Additional says some love the Caribbean side like me. Spent much time in Nica, never went. Some love the Caribbean like me. I like the Caribbean. I don't like that portion of the Caribbean. Right. I'm sure if I was in the Lesser Antilles, I'd be like, this is fantastic. I love this. But that Mosquito Coast is different than you get out there, right? And there's parts of it I really like. Like I'm not saying it's all bad. I'm just saying the Pacific is awfully nice, and it's hard to compare. I also am not a big fan of the food out there. And they speak English there, of course. Panama, dotted lines. But Panama, yeah, in this region, Panama is really, really excellent. Having lived there, it's what inspired us to come to Nicaragua. So thanks to Panama for making us realize that Latin America is definitely where we wanted to be. It was a great experience. You know, if you said I had to live in Panama, fine. You know, I'd be perfectly happy living in Panama. But we came to Nicaragua and found that it's cheaper, it's safer, it's bigger, more coastline. There's a lot of things that add up, and we just generally like the vibe better. But for those of us who live nearby, Panama's a really quick trip away. It's quick enough we can take a bus, or more likely a very easy flight, right? And sometimes I do. Like when I'm going to Belize, I go through Panama. So I'll just get off in Panama City, hang out with friends, go out to eat, get a little bit of Panama in my system, and I love it. I love driving along the PTY coast. I love going out to the peninsula. I love going to Casco Viejo, or Casco Antiguo, as people started calling it since I was there. I love the high rises and the cocktail culture and a lot of stuff in Panama City, even though it's a small city. It's fantastic, and it's got a subway, and it's got big hotels and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's fantastic, but it's also a lot more expensive. It's a lot more to deal with. I love the big bridges. But when you get out into like real Panama, it's just like Nicaragua, right? Small, poor villages. It's nearly exactly the same for most of it. So I really appreciate having it nearby, and it's a country that I love. But there's a reason that we also chose Nicaragua and moved here, right? And definitely not for everyone. A lot of people will go to both and choose Panama, absolutely, right? And for good reason. It's got a lot to offer, and things that we don't, especially if you want city living. If you're getting out of the city, then I think we compete really heavily, and almost always I would choose Nicaragua. But if you wanted the big city, then nothing in Nicaragua is going to in any way resemble Panama City. However, if I wanted Panama City, I would want Guatemala City, right? And so I'd be up there, not in Panama City. Isaac says, hey, Scott, I'm pretty sure I know the answer after watching your videos on the new dual citizenship requirements for Nicaragua, but want to make sure. So just to be clear, I have not done a video on the newest requirement. I did videos on the proposed requirements. So things have changed, and I do have word directly from Migracion. So my mom was born in Nicaragua, but I was born in the U.S., so am a citizen there. That is correct. You are a citizen here. I would need to renounce U.S. citizenship, even if citizenship by descent would apply, since I'm seeking Nicaraguan citizenship. So your end result is correct, but you're using the words wrong. You cannot seek Nicaraguan citizenship. As a citizen, it is impossible to seek citizenship. Seeking means going for something you don't have, but you do have, so you can't seek it. You physically can't. It's like standing on the top of Mount Everest and saying, I would like to climb the tallest mountain. Well, you can't. You're on top of the tallest mountain. You cannot continue to climb it. There's nowhere to go from there. So you have Nicaraguan citizenship. That is a fact. In order to apply for a passport or do anything with your Nicaraguan citizenship, you would be expected to have to renounce your U.S. citizenship under the new law. The new law that went into effect later than the proposed law, obviously because proposed would come before in effect, does not use the seeking term. They actually did remove dual citizenship. This is not my video on the details of that. This is one I've not had to deal with firsthand. I have it written out from Migracion to give you guys. This was sent directly to me by the authorities to put on the show. So I'm going to do a video sometime soonish going through the actual changes as they were handed to Migracion, because they're the ones who enforce them. So you are unfortunately in the situation where no, it, so Nicaragua can and possibly would ignore the fact that you have another citizenship and grant you your passport and such in Nicaragua. Realistically, especially because it's from the United States and not from, say, Spain, they are extremely unlikely to look the other way on that. You are a citizen. So what you would be triggering is the choice. The same thing happens to Japanese children when they turn 18. If you're, and I have friends who have kids like this, they're dual Japanese American citizens. From the age of birth until they turn 18, they are dual citizens. Once they turn 18, the United States allows them to stay dual citizens, but Japan requires that they choose. If they do not choose their Japanese citizenship, they automatically lose it. Nicaragua is doing something similar, but it doesn't trigger just because you turned 18. It triggers when you interact with Nicaragua at a passport level. So by going and saying, I'd like a Nicaraguan passport, they will say, no, in most cases, and you have to argue, no, 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 no. I am a Nicaraguan citizen. You must give me my passport. I understand I have to renounce my American citizenship. Then you should have no problem. But that's what you have to do. I know people who have done this. I don't know them personally very well. I know them from the channel. But I know people who did this right as it went into effect. Why they waited until days after it went into effect instead of days before, I don't know. But they waited for days after the effect, went to get their passport, were denied, mostly because Migracion didn't have clear direction yet, I'm sure. But now they know that, yes, you absolutely can renounce your American. They are not taking away your Nicaraguan citizenship just because you were born in the U.S. Absolutely not. But there is now this, now you're forced into a choice. And I think most places turn you away by default because they don't want to trigger you making a choice that is disastrous. And with this, my camera just died, so it's really a good time to end it because I do need to go. And my kids are waiting for me. I just heard them. And I have to do a few things, so I'm sorry that it is now darkness. But Lending says, I just saw Nicaragua has Hornet jets. I find that unlikely. We have Hornet jets? Is that what I heard flying over a little bit ago? I don't think we do, but okay. Indigenous said arranged marriage. Not sure where that came from. And Indigenous said, wow. So I'm going to cut it now because I need to go. We're at 300 views, which is not bad for a show. Again, I apologize for the darkness. And so as always, consider giving us a thumbs up and go watch another video, leave a comment in the comments, tell other people about the show, all that good stuff, and I will see all of you tomorrow. Oh, have you ever had a place... Wait. Kevin 3 Wilson says, if you ever need a place to stay in San Juan, let me know. Happy to have you stay at our house. I know you're not a big fan of San Juan, but would love to donate our place to you to do an honest review. That would be awesome. Kevin, shoot me an email or something, because I do have to wrap up the show, but I appreciate that a lot. And I don't want to live in San Juan, but I do like visiting it. Like, I like San Juan, and I do give San Juan credit for being the town I was in when I realized I wanted to move back to Nicaragua. I then realized that was not the town I wanted to move to, but it was an important part of making that decision. All right, guys, thanks so much. Have a good night. Kevin, thank you so much for the offer. I will take you up on that. That sounds awesome. And I will see all of you tomorrow.